Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Winter had come. The evenings were already quite dark outside. Second shift at school. Just finished the last class. "Maria, you have no idea what I saw," whispered one boy in my ear. The calmest girls in the class. "It's unbelievable." "Do you want me to tell you in confidence? But you can't tell anyone." The girl looked at her classmate in bewilderment. Maria was not one of those who are ready to get involved in all sorts of adventures. Especially tomorrow, there were a lot of lessons to do. Go for it. No one in our class knows about it. Another boy came up to her. "It's so cool. You'll love it." The girl packed her bag and headed for the exit. The two boys kept up with her. "So it's true what Lenka said about you? You mean the psycho?" Finally, one of the classmates went all in, and we thought it was all a lie. "I'm not afraid," said the schoolgirl resolutely. "All right, let's go, but quickly, because I have to do my homework before Mom comes." The hooligans rejoiced, lost their hands. One of them quickly ran forward. He reached the unfamiliar Maria office and yanked the door. The door was closed, but to the girl's surprise, one of the classmates quickly pulled some kind of key out of his pocket and opened it. The classroom was dark. "Keep the lights off," one of the boys ordered. "Because we care." "Come on, open the back room," he commanded. The second one in the dark finally managed to open the right room and entered it. Maria went in with them. "Well?" the girl asked them. "What's the big deal?" She looked at the barely visible silhouettes of her classmates. "You'll see." The leader shouted briskly and pushed the girl into the back room. The hooligans quickly ran out of the room. One of them held the door while the other locked it. Maria quickly got to her feet and ran to the door. "Open up. What are you doing?" She struggled. "Alex, well, let me out of here now." But the boys had already locked the study door and ran downstairs. They both chuckled quite a bit. That would be hilarious when they found her tomorrow. Would they bust their bellies laughing as they ran home? Well, good, you made duplicate keys. I can only imagine what would happen to her if she found the light and turned it on. Laughing all the way to Alex, who started the whole thing. Why the boys decided to make fun of their classmate Maria, they did not know exactly. She was just a quiet girl, and Alex always wanted to do something so that the girl experienced pain or humiliation. Maria was smart beyond her years, and that put a lot of pressure on the boys. Alex was from a dysfunctional family. He was not particularly loved there and never wanted. But Maria looked like a neat, well-groomed girl. They always came to all the meetings. She was praised for her tests and dictations. And Will was a fool. He never knew about friends. He saw Alex as some kind of important figure. That was mostly just in his language. In reality, his friend was cowardly and unreliable. Maria tried to break down the door, but the child's strength was so insignificant compared to the back room that had been stormed by more than one generation of children that it was like it was made of metal. "Mommy, Mommy," screamed the girl. "Help! Somebody! Help! Let me out!" But no one heard her. The school was completely deserted. The guard had gone around several times and didn't see anything suspicious. How long Maria had been crying, she didn't know. But at one point she realized that her eyes had gotten used to the darkness and began to see. Especially through the crack under the door there was some light. The girl got up from the floor and tried to look around. No, she shouted at the top of her voice when she saw a skeleton near the wall. No, she screamed again and lost consciousness. Outside the window it was snowing, and Alex and Will were coming home happy. They had pulled off such a big deed that they saw themselves as real heroes. On the way, the boys saw a big trash can and threw their keys into it. Both realized they had to get rid of the evidence so they wouldn't be suspected of anything. What would Maria say? They didn't care. The boys were sure that no one would believe her. An expensive car pulled up in front of a high-rise office center. A young man got out of it and headed toward the left wing, where a large sign for Jaguar Publishing hung. The guy opened the door and, without looking around, went straight to the director's office. "Hi, Max." The man tore himself away from his papers. "Are you on business or what?" "Sorry, I don't have much time." Dad, I need money. The principal didn't hear anything new. Can you give me some? Max, will I ever hear from you that you came to help me? The man replied sternly. Or do I have to deprive you of everything first? But don't start, the boy remarked. I haven't graduated yet, and you and I agreed that I would get up to speed. Only then Mark Austin gave him a displeased look and took his wallet out of his pocket. He pulled out a few bills and tossed them defiantly on the table. I hope that's enough, Father asked coldly. Can you leave me alone now? I have a new issue of the magazine coming out. Yes, please. Grabbing the money from the table, happily headed for Max's door. Don't you know the word thank you at all? Mark Austin grumbled unhappily. Thank you. The son shouted at the top of his voice. I'll never forget it. He began to play the comedy. Idiot, whispered Max. With a satisfied look, went out of the publishing house. Well, Leoka, now hold on. The guy again jumped into the car and drove towards a familiar cafe. There near the door, his friend Martin was already waiting for him. What took you so long? He asked unhappily. I'm freezing here. Let's hurry up and warm up. No problem, Martin winked at his friend. I've just been to my father's, so I'll order. The young men ordered a pizza and a beer. The guys had been friends for years, but when they met freshman year, Max got punched in the face for his attitude. Hey, why are you looking at me like that? Asked a fellow student, tall blonde. It is from me that you have such a face, unhappily tried to spread his tail turkey. Or I'll show you where you belong. I don't give a damn about you, the boy said. So sit down and keep your mouth shut. What did you say? Max jumped up from the table. Are you trying to get in trouble? Somebody needs me. Martin turned away from him. Your mirror's fooling you. Trust me, you're not so tough. Let's get out of here. The guy clenched his fists. I'll show you which one of us needs to look at himself in the mirror. Come on, agreed the classmate. But don't whine and call your daddy afterwards. Max, being the son of a rich man with connections, always felt right. But he didn't know that Martin had a black belt in karate. So as soon as the guy attacked a fellow student with fists, he took him to the ground in 2 moves. For Max, it was the first time in his life he saw from the outside that he wasn't so tough. Let me help you up. Martin held out his hand to his opponent. I hope this will be enough. Yes, Max replied briefly, and like a dog with his tail up, he walked back into the auditorium. Another 6 months passed, and by the end of the first year, Max and Martin became inseparable. A classmate realized that behind the arrogant nature and friend hides a sensitive and honest guy. What's what, but Max never broke his word, even if he had to answer for it. Martin over time taught the guy to control his emotions, and Max, you could say, stopped being so hot-tempered and no longer got into fights over nothing. Not only a friend had such an influence on the guy, but Martin himself realized that Max taught him to take risks and try something new in life, and the latter was always easy to deal with, even when friends got into very big trouble. Max's optimism and sense of humor helped them both get out of it. People, I'm fed up with my ancestor and his publishing house, Max sighed. I don't want to get involved in all this. I still have time to finish my degree, and then I have to get a job with him. That's why I'm telling you that we need to finish our work from the beer from the bottle, answered the friend. If we do well, we'll have our own business. You won't have to inherit your father's business anymore. Jesus, if someone had told me a few years ago that I was going to do that, I would have told them to go for it. Max laughed. I even have to lie to my father about needing money for entertainment. You tell him on the merry-go-round? Martin laughed. I'll tell you about our case. I'll tell you what, with your irrepressible power, it's the very thing. Instead of all your squabbles, you're doing a noble thing now. You're helping the whole of life, you might say. Yeah, Max laughed. Call me a messa. He choked on his beer. When everyone finds out, I'll be laughed at. Max, I don't care what other people say about us. His friend looked at him seriously. I know that all great men started somewhere. It's not that I want to be great. It's just that I want to do something useful for others. That's what I'm all about. What's the point of being the richest? Well, you have everything then, what? Counting your money every day. We have nothing. You and me, we started from scratch. Another man will look at us and say, Maybe I can do something like that. Do you know how many years I've dreamed of getting my black belt? How much work I've done? And what? Somebody will say it'll help me defend myself in life. Oh yeah, will I catch bullets on the fly with my teeth? Or will I be able to grab a knife flying at me from behind on the fly? It's all nonsense. If it's for self-discipline, yes. Karate has helped me a lot in my life, but you can discipline yourself in more gentle ways. Martin, I know you're right about something, my friend replied. But I haven't gone through it all yet, so I can't look at things the way you do. You remember how many experiments Edison did, how much material didn't fit? I'm not even talking about Tesla. Nobody believed in him at all. He worked as a laborer for years just to continue his research. 2 years ago, when friends went on vacation to the river, Martin in his head flashed a strange idea. Guys came to their favorite place, but just could not recognize it. What kind of people do we have? Martin was indignant. Where he is, there is a constant shit. But why can't you clean up after yourself? The guy wouldn't stop. You could at least put all the garbage in bags. I hate it. Yes, it's a good thing we didn't take the girls this time. Max rubbed his head. You could say the whole vacation is ruined. He sighed and went to the river. There were plastic bottles, bags, disposable dishes lying everywhere. Some even floated in the river not far from the shore. The mood of the friends was at zero. Martin came over and sat down next to Max. They were both silent for a long time. Suddenly the guy jumped up. You know, Max, if I could fix all this, I would not spare my strength, said Martin. What do you mean? His friend looked at him in bewilderment. Put guards at all the vacation spots. No, a thought flashed through the boy's mind. That would be pointless. I could make something useful out of this garbage. It's been recycled for a long time, Max said. But you see, it doesn't work, Max. I've heard that polymers are used to make gasoline and methane in the laboratory, Martin reasoned. Which means we're dealing with organics, right? Well, his friend didn't understand. What do you mean by that? I'm not a chemistry geek. Which means we could take it all back to the original materials. A light bulb went off in Martin's head. Hydrogen, hydrogen? At a loss, Max asked. What's hydrogen got to do with it? I don't understand anything. What are you trying to tell me? But it's so easy. The boy was delighted. Hydrogen is the most common element on Earth, but it's always in a bound form. If we could get it freely, it would be cooler than gasoline and electricity. I think I read somewhere about hydrogen engines. The guy's starting to remember. Martin, it's so complicated. That's what everybody thinks, sighed the friend. Nobody wants to do it. That's why you and I are in this mess right now. Our people aren't ready to clean up after themselves. So we have to think of something else. If you and I could get hydrogen from this garbage and develop our own hydrogen engine, do you realize what a turnaround that would be? That's what Max has become. I'm not in the loop on this whole thing. You want me to go around picking up trash, and then something explodes in our lab, and you and I go to the afterlife. No, thanks. I'd rather finish my econ degree someday and work at my dad's publishing house. Leave me alone. Didn't you see the movie October Sky? I didn't give up all of a sudden. Nobody believed that the main character would launch his own rocket. But he did. So we'll launch our own hydrogen engine. For the first 3 months, Martin tried to persuade Max to join his experiments, but he was reluctant. Martin began to disappear more and more often in his garage, which his father gave him. Mother of God. One day a friend of Martin's came to see him. He was looking at some test tubes and instruments, showing him something with interest. He's pointing at some kind of vessel that looks like a balloon. And that's what it is. Without distracting from his work, said suddenly there is gaseous hydrogen in a compressed state. Did you get it? In shock, asked Max. You got it from garbage. Yes, smiled Martin. From the garbage that was lying by the river. Max was so amazed by what he saw. From that day on, he visited his friend more and more often. You come with me, the guy once suggested to him. Unfortunately, for now, I have to get the raw materials myself. You want to pick up trash? Martin's friend looked at him in amazement. Are you serious? No, of course I'll go with you, he laughed. But only for fun. I want to watch you from the sidelines. Martin had been filling the old bags with bags and plastic for almost 2 hours. The full bags he was tying up and hiding so he could take them on his bike to his garage later. By God, Max approached him. "Quit this dirty business," he said unhappily. "You're like a bum who collects for a bottle." "I don't care how I look from the outside," Martin said. "You know, there was a man who planted trees in a deserted place somewhere in England." Everybody looked at him and they all turned their fingers. But then, when that very spot grew into a gorgeous forest, he and his family had a great time there. So he who laughs last laughs. And yet, after a while, Max couldn't stand it any longer and joined his friend. Getting hydrogen was no longer a problem for the boys. But to build their own engine, they needed not only knowledge, but also a lot of money. Max has to beg his father for money time and time again. So he and Martin pieced together one part after another for their project. Max was still in shock at himself. The guy loved fun girl parties. And how he traded it all in for hours of hanging out in a stinky old garage. The guy couldn't understand. "Martin, Nancy won't talk to me anymore. It's like a friend's gone off the deep end. We're stuck here all the time. You want me to give my whole life to science? That's fine." "Ignore him," the friend said. "Your girlfriend should be a companion, a friend, not this misunderstanding with pumped-up lips. What can you talk to her about? Imagine there are very interesting conversations between a girl and a guy. Look, Max started it. I don't know how you live without girls after you made that fool. Have you forgotten about the female gender? All right, that's enough. We need to go out in public, or I'll go crazy with your hydrogen." The boy protested. "We're going to a nightclub tonight." "What are we going to do there?" Martin looked at him in bewilderment. "What?" and before rubbed his hands together in anticipation. "First, we'll get drunk. Then we'll find 2 beauties and spend an unforgettable night with them." "You go, but I have to work," Martin objected. "Especially I have to work until morning." "As you wish, but I'm going for good. I thought I'd bring you a beer. Maybe you'll cheer yourself up at least this way." "I don't drink at work," the guy replied briefly and fully immersed himself in his work. Max had a stormy night. The guy rested 100%. His mother barely woke him up. The next morning, "Max, have you been drinking again?" His father looked at him unhappily. "All Martin knew all your pocket money." The boy wasn't happy himself. His head was rattling at the seams and he couldn't even get out of bed. I'd rather have his hydrogen chasing him, he thought. He wouldn't have a headache in the morning. After that, Max's late-night drinking stopped. Of course, he missed the company of women very much. But Martin's invention had drawn him in so much that he sometimes completely forgot about it. And after nearly a year, the boys went into a stupor. They tried revving their engine back and forth, but they couldn't get what they wanted out of it. "Martin, what about him? Well, why don't we just leave it? Why do we have to reinvent the wheel?" Max was indignant. "Let's make one like everyone else's." Back in 1806, this Frenchman, as it was invented by François Isaac de Rivas, reminded Martin. "But that's the thing, I don't want to repeat what was or is. And you know why. Because if it worked that well, all cars would have been running on hydrogen long ago. But they don't. So there's something wrong here. Martin, I've already had my say. I'm an honest-to-goodness friend. We've been working on this for almost 2 years, but it's not right. Max, we need to look for like-minded people." A friend came up with an idea. "Now, when there is the internet, we could cooperate with someone. Maybe we could find a solution together. What do you suggest?" "Call out," sighed the friend. "I don't know any idiots like us anymore." "All right, I'll look into it." Tiredly sat down on the chair guy. "Let's take a break for now." "I'm tired too," Martin said in a fictitious voice. Finally, 2 weeks later, a friend called Max and told him that he had found something. The young men were sinking their beer. "Martin, come on, tell me." Max asked him impatiently. "Did you manage to find anyone?" "Yes," he answered briefly. "And I'm still in complete shock. You have no idea who I met on the internet." "Who?" Curiosity made the guy tan. "Did you get to meet a great mind?" "Yes. Her name is Maria." Looked at him carefully, friend, "and she is a real genius." What's the woman's astonishment? "All of a sudden you're mocking me? No woman would understand your hydrogen, and this one does, smiled Martin. We're going to Detroit next week. Maria agreed to meet us. Where? Detroit. No, you're out of your mind, his friend said. Where's Salt Lake City and where's Detroit? So what? Are we taking the train? Ignoring his friend's protests, Martin said. So get ready. All right, let's say she's a megabrain. Then why can't she communicate with us on the internet? Looking for flaws. Max, how do you figure that? His friend looked at him in bewilderment. If she has assembled a new hydrogen engine, how will you understand it on the internet? You have to see and feel everything there. I don't know, tried to change Martin's mind. A friend. Well, let her record some video and send it to you. Max, come on, really, stop whining, cut the guy off. Let's just think about where we're gonna stay. I don't think we'll have a problem with that. Unexpectedly answered the friend. My cousin lives there on my mother's side. True, we have not communicated with him for a long time, but I think we can try. We'll rent a hotel in case of emergency. I've already warned my cousins, Martin replied. My father can only give me a little, and as you know, I'm not working anywhere with my invention yet. God, I can't wait to finish the institute. Well, don't worry about the money. I'll talk to my father, Max suggested. I think he won't object to our trip. I'll say that I want to visit my mom's relatives, that they've been asking me for a long time. And then, after the defense of the diploma so in his publishing house, so twisted, that more and will not see them. That's what Max thought. His father gave him money for the trip without any problems. The boy found his cousin's phone number somewhere, and in a few days he and Martin were on the train to Detroit. Hey Max, hugged the guy's cousin with his thick arms. It's been a long time. I never thought I'd see you again. Well, hello, brother. The guest rejoiced. But I'm not alone. I'm with a friend. This is Martin. And I'll tell you honestly, we're here on business. All right, let's go, the guy suggested. We'll talk at home. It's my day off. The cousin was 2 years older than Max. In general, it was a sad story for his family, or rather, for his mother Nicole was from a small village near Detroit. They lived poorly despite the fact that his parents had worked in the collective farm all their lives. They had never been able to get a proper house. And the problem was the woman's mother. For as long as Nicole could remember, her mother had been drinking all her life. Naturally, there was no supervision for the children, and there were two of them, the woman and her younger sister. And as they say, the latter followed in her footsteps. When Nicole turned 18, she immediately went to Detroit. Here the girl worked in a store. One day, a handsome young man came in there. It was obvious that he was a commuter. The guy looked at her, and he liked the girl at first sight. So Mark took Nicole to his house. Lucy, her younger sister, married a Muscovite. He was a troublemaker from the beginning. That's how they started drinking together. They had 2 sons. One died as a boy. The child strangled everything with a bag that he put on his head. Naturally, none of the parents were watching him. So, as they say, to the meeting. My cousin put a bottle of vodka on the table. We'd like to abstain for now. Martin said no right away, sorry, we have an important meeting today, so we'd like something lighter. Do you have any tea? Are you kidding me? Tea? The owner laughed. All right, I'll do it myself. He poured himself a cut glass. The guests looked at him in bewilderment. Max began to realize that he had made a big mistake in staying with his cousin. Not only did he seem to be drinking, but his apartment, which he had inherited from his parents, was a mess. It smelled like the place had been lived in by bums who hadn't been cleaned in years. Martin and Max looked at each other. You have a case here, you say. The guy brought the bread to his nose after emptying the glass. Come on, tell me what you've got going on. Anything I can do to help. We're here to see a scientist of yours, Martin said. There's a genius living here? Really? The owner looked at him in surprise. And who does what? She deals with alternative fuels. Max tried to change the subject from drinking. Her name is Maria. Maria is in shock, said the brother. You came here to meet Maria. Do you know her? The cousin guessed. Does that name sound familiar to you? No, answered the boy quickly. It's the first time I've heard of her. I just thought you came to the man's house. But you did. It just so happens that it is a girl who deals with such a complicated topic. Martin smiled. All right, God be with her, with this Maria. The host poured himself another glass. I'll drink and go to bed then. And when will you go to your business? Just lock the door. I have a second key. If I need it, I'll open myself from the inside. Max and his friend were in complete shock. They watched in silence as the guy dried the whole bottle. Without saying a word, he got up from the table and retired to his bed. Brother, I think we'll probably leave right after the meeting. Try to find a reason, Max. So what are you then? Let us not be able to see you. Ah well, have a happy journey, muttered through the pillowmaster and turned away on the other side. What was that? Martin couldn't calm down. I don't have any options. What can this man be called? I also have perfect hair came out of Max's apartment. God, it's been years since I've seen him, and I really hope it's the last time. We'd better get a hotel. The guys couldn't recover for a long time. They still had 3 hours left before meeting Maria, and they wandered aimlessly around Detroit. You know, of course, I love antiques, but not so much. Looking at an old church, said Martin. Frankly, it's all weighing on me. A friend agreed with me too. It feels like there is nothing to breathe. There seems to be a lot of space and a river, but it's still not Salt Lake City. Finally, the time was up, and the guys went to the cafe that Maria had indicated in her letter. I can't understand why she doesn't call, Max said in bewilderment. No, she has to write. She's got this obsession. How would I know? The friend said. Maybe she's keeping her distance so that everything is official. The young people approached a cafe with the symbolic name Maria's Pastry Shop. A beautiful blonde girl stood at the door. At the sight of Max and Martin, she smiled broadly and approached them. Are you Maria? Martin guessed. Do we look so different from the local guys? He said jokingly. The girl smiled and said nothing. She just waved her hand, and the whole procession went to the table near the window. The girl was holding a strange object. The guys had never seen anything like that before. Maria quickly grabbed what looked like a pen and began to write. I am very happy to meet you, read Martin. It is important to me that you are interested in my work, and I am ready to discuss it with you. I'm sorry, but we'll have to communicate like this because I can't talk. Max slammed down the big lump that came up to his throat. The guy looked at the girl more closely. Maria's blue eyes were just glowing. Maria, don't worry, everything is fine. Martin tried to come to his senses. There's no problem with that. The young people talked for a long time. It was mainly Martin who delved into the subtleties. Max kept looking at Maria. God, how is this possible? He thought, such an amazing girl. She's a real genius. But a mute shiver ran down his spine. She can't speak, and it doesn't seem to bother her at all. That's the kind of willpower I wish I had. I've always envied Lage for his stamina. But Maria, it's incredible. The girl as if read his thoughts and looked at him with interest. After a few seconds, she, embarrassed, and lowered her eyes. After they drank tea and completely sorted out Maria's ideas, she invited them to her place to watch the device. Maria, this is something amazing. Martin was in shock. It turns out that according to your idea, such an engine will squeeze out not 120 kilometers per 1 kilogram of hydrogen, but 150. That's just unbelievable. The young people went into an old room, which the girl rented as a laboratory. She showed them all the blueprints, and finally they started the engine. It works. Martin shouted in excitement. Maria, you are just a clever girl. Hydrogen from garbage, and your engine is the new future. Max's hair seemed to stand on end. Everything he saw seemed impossible to him. The guy couldn't even speak in amazement. Finally, the girl turned off the engine, and they sat down at the table to discuss it all. Maria, what about the patent? Martin asked the girl. They agreed to patent it. The girl grabbed a tablet and wrote something quickly, took her hand away, and let the guest read it. It's still a problem. They don't want it. The guy read it. Who'd doubt it? Then their whole gas and oil industry will go to hell. But that's okay. We'll work together on this volume thing. The main thing is that it works, and even with such savings. The guys exchanged phone numbers, and agreed that Maria would come to them in Salt Lake City as soon as she could. The guys said goodbye. I should have said overwhelmed with emotion. No one had any strength left. Maria said goodbye to the guests and joyfully returned to her laboratory. The young people brought her such inspiration that one thought after another came to the girl. She sat down at her tablet and began to write everything down. In a few minutes, Maria was carried into her world, which belonged only to her. For many years now, she had finally met like-minded people. And now her invention could have a new life. That same evening, Max and Martin took the train home. Their minds were so excited by what they had seen that they were both eager to get down to business. What if we could put the whole machine together? It was to hydrogen that Martin's thoughts drifted into the future. That would be a real sensation. But at least we could build the engine, sighed his friend. And you're already going for a whole car. Maria is an incredible girl, Martin continued. You have to have such talent. Honestly, I had some gender prejudices before I met her. But like that, women have less brains than men. But Maria proved me wrong. How do you cook in a machine like that? Look at her. She's got physics, chemistry, math. She clicks the tower like nuts. Yes, Max said dreamily. I like Maria very much. She's a dream girl. And it doesn't matter that she can't tell her, pushed Martin with a friend's elbow. Don't get all romantic on me. Maria is our friend, not a date girl. Don't you like her as a girl? Max looked at his friend without understanding. She is just beautiful. Did you see her eyes? They are so blue, just like the sky. I would not refuse a girl like her, but I have a purely pragmatic interest in her, he sighed. I want us to join forces and create a damn car that will not only run on hydrogen, but that will be the most economical. Back home, the boys began their experiments with renewed vigor. Now they needed to get as much hydrogen as possible, so that then part of it could be transported somehow to Maria. Martin dreamed that after Maria had patented his engine, he would be able to get her official permission to use it in his car. The girl didn't mind. Max, on the other hand, dreamed of something else. The girl immediately fell into his soul. Maria did not interest him as a scientist, although he admired her. He liked her as a person. There seemed to be something more behind her silence. For the first time in his life, the guy could look at a girl not as an object of lust or a thing, but as a person with whom he wanted to spend his time, to be friends, to discuss pressing problems. The day after Martin Max arrived, they were fully immersed in work. It was March, and the guys didn't need to go to the institute. Max had already written his diploma long ago. Martin sometimes typed something on the computer at night. Martin, let me give you some money. Let them do the practical part. A friend suggested it. But when you get your diploma, you don't have to write. I'll pick up some hardware myself. Boy, after all, I have to finish it. And why didn't I get into engineering? He resented me. After the guests, Maria just plowed. The girl had already written several scientific articles, constantly wrote about her work on the internet. But except for laughter and insults, no one offered anything concrete. And then these two people appeared in her life. Her mom was talking to her mother. You know, I feel like they're gonna help me. Together we can get this whole thing started. Maria, how much effort you put into all this? Her mother answered her. It's unbelievable. And it was true. After the girl stopped speaking after a severe fright, her parents immediately moved to the other side of the city, where Maria began to go to a specialized school for mute children. All her teachers were just shocked by her. After the tragic incident, the girl's mind began to work even faster. On the one hand, Jean's Maria's father was a chemist, and everything in their house was littered with rare manuals on all areas of the science. But Greg was not accepted in his time. All ideas were rejected, and he eventually began to drink. Maria, from the 5th grade, seriously began to be interested in chemistry. The girl hoped that this way she could return her father. Yes, Leonid Grigorievich read her complex theories, explained to his daughter how the universe is organized. But after she went to bed, the man put a bottle on the table. Maria's mother couldn't do anything about it. Even constant first places in the chemistry Olympiad for special children couldn't change anything. And one day Greg simply didn't wake up. For Maria, it was the strongest blow. And if not for her father's books, in which she then immersed, the girl simply went mad. Nena, Maria's mother, was very happy for her daughter. She realized that the brilliant mind of her daughter should be noticed by someone. But most of all, she wanted Maria to marry one day, have children, and find her happiness as a woman. But who would marry her? Her mother thought, if someone as dumb as she was. And where will you find a guy who loves science as much as Maria? Mostly they're all insecure, cornered. They just want to live their lives without anyone touching them. Despite the fact that Maria was on it, it was a huge problem. But thanks to her, the girl could get some money from the state. She did not need to work for this. The girl realized that if she wanted to realize her dream, she needed to fully focus on her work. That is why she could not work fully. Sometimes Maria was given an order to do some control or tests. She even tried her hand at artificial stones, which the girl grew for jewelers. After Maria graduated from the special school, she was faced with a very difficult choice. Undoubtedly, the girl had talent, and she needed to continue studying. But no university went her way. "How are we going to get her?" said the chancellor of Detroit's university in dismay. "How will she go to class?" Nina ran to all kinds of authorities, but everywhere she was rejected. Maria could not study in a regular university. The girl cried bitterly for several months, but then she pulled herself together and decided to act on her own. Maria did not want to be a theoretical scientist. She realized that in order to get somewhere, you need a practical part. The girl decided to deal with future technologies. She chose alternative fuel for her project. Maria knew for a long time that hydrogen was the most common element, and despite the complexity of the work, it was possible to produce it. Maria became interested in isotopes of hydrogen, air, and after almost 3 years, she was able to isolate pure hydrogen from it. Maria spent almost all day now in her laboratory. She wanted to prepare for her trip to Salt Lake City. The girl wanted to make some improvements to her engine. It was almost 8 o'clock when Maria realized that she was very tired. She put down all her drawings, closed her workbook. Only now she remembered that she hadn't eaten anything all day. She thought, "I have to get home quickly, or I'll starve to death. Besides, my mom already texted me that she was worried." Maria closed the door to her lab and walked towards the bus stop. The girl rented a very cheap room in the place where warehouses used to be, but the place was deserted. Maria walked forward quickly as she suddenly felt someone swooping down on her from behind and clamped her nose with something. A few seconds later, the girl lost consciousness. How heavy! A man's quiet voice was heard in the darkness. He was trying to pull a bag over Maria. At last he succeeded, and he put the girl in the car and drove her to an unknown destination. Maria didn't come to her senses the whole time. "This is where you belong." The same voice was heard, and the man began to pull the girl's body out of the car in which he had brought her. After a few minutes, some kind of door opened and Maria was carried into the room as a bundle. The man put her on a stretcher and took her somewhere. After a few minutes, he pulled into some cold room, pulled off Maria's sack, and threw the girl on the floor. "This is where you belong," he laughed. He went out and locked the door behind him. After about 20 minutes, Maria came to her senses. She could already feel the cold. The girl jumped up quickly. She had had a fear of the dark for years. In an instant, she found herself in a biology class in the back room where her classmates had locked her up for the night. Then from fear, the girl lost consciousness and lay on the floor until morning, until she was not found there. Her mother and the police searched for her all night, but the girl was nowhere to be found. They even came to the school and checked all the elementary school classrooms. But they did not go to the 3rd floor at that time. After Maria was brought to consciousness, the girl realized that she could not speak. She tried to make some sounds, but nothing worked. The doctor said that Maria would never speak again because of the severe stress. This came as a real shock to everyone. Maria began to panic. She felt her lungs start to work frantically, but she still couldn't breathe. A strange odor hit her nostrils. The girl tried to breathe somehow. She remembered her phone and reached into her pocket. She pressed the buttons, but the phone seemed to hang. The screen kept showing someone else's number. Maria was in such a state that she couldn't recognize it. The girl began to write something with trembling fingers. "Help me, please." She duplicated it in her mind. "I'm locked up somewhere. It's dark in here." Finally, the girl felt as if she had been electrocuted, and she directed the light of the screen to the room she was in. There were corpses lying on tables. In the morgue, automatically wrote the girl and had a phone with horror. She began to gasp. It seemed to her that she had already died. The fear was so strong that she could not cope with it. The girl closed her eyes, but after a moment, strange thoughts began to appear in her head. Was there really nothing that could be done? One by one, the thoughts appeared in her head. Yes, I'm trapped. No one can help me now. But if I can't do something from the outside, then I can do something from the inside. After that thought, it was as if the girl had some strength. She suddenly jumped to her feet and started screaming, but she couldn't do anything. Maria opened her mouth wide, but she couldn't utter a sound. Could I suddenly hit her on the head like a hammer? No. The girl heard someone's inhuman voice. No. Let me out of here, help. A loud scream echoed throughout her brain. Maria screamed for so long until her voice went ah. After she threw away her fear, she felt better. The girl felt herself start to breathe more freely, her lungs and easily conducting air. No, the girl said aloud. God, who locked me in the morgue? Loudly she spoke. I began to speak again. Through tears, whispered the girl. But how can I get out of here now? Maria looked around once more. She was uneasy, but there was no longer such wild fear and terror. She was more confused by the terrible odor and the cold. God, I'll either freeze or die here by morning. The girl was afraid. When will I sing? Suddenly, she decided so unexpectedly. And Maria began to sing. She tried to remember all the songs she knew. The powerful voice made her feel warmer, and the terrible odor stopped irritating her nostrils so much. It had been probably an hour when the girl took a break, and only now Maria noticed that her phone had been dead for a long time. In her bag, she didn't notice it anywhere. Maybe it's thieves. The girl thought to herself, they stole my bag and then brought it here to get rid of me. But whatever it was, her phone not only hung up, but stopped working. As it always does in these complicated cases. But then, I'll sing until morning. The girl decided. So I will definitely not freeze. I imagine the state of the pathologist who enters the morgue and hears singing here. The girl laughed. He would go crazy. Maria, as if looking at herself from the outside, and could not believe that she not only survived, did not go crazy, but also retained a sense of humor. What's happening to me? She said out loud, I'm trapped in a morgue among all these corpses. Of course I feel some fear, but it doesn't make me sick. I'm at peace inside. And most importantly, I started to say again what it all means. The girl was tired of standing on her feet. She tried to sit down near the wall. Maria felt that she would even fall asleep. She began to feel strongly inclined to sleep. But the girl was afraid that by morning she would be cold. The whole story makes me laugh. She laughed. Who would have thought it? For years, doctors have been fighting over my disease. I've had so many procedures, and now I've been cured by a corpse. She couldn't calm down. Not even animals, not plants, just ordinary dead people. It's true that fear is a great fear. If someone told me about this, I'd die at the thought. That I'm not only sane or conscious, but I'm not bad. If it weren't for this cold. Maria's eyes became quite accustomed to the darkness, and she began to distinguish the bodies lying on the couch. The girl took a few steps around the room for the first time and walked around. It seemed to her that there was a warmer place near the door, and she moved there. At first, Maria pounded on the door with her fists, but then she realized that either no one could hear her, or there was no one in the morgue. The girl squatted down. She felt some coolness, but the penetrating cold, as in the beginning, the room was not here, and the corpses were lying away from her. They were all concentrated in the coldest place. Why did they do this to me? Maria began to come to her senses. Is it some kind of accident, or is it all set up? She pondered. But you don't just do things like that. So someone organized it all. But what were their motives? Maybe they want to kill me because of my invention. There have been so many accidents with famous scientists and inventors. Maybe some oil oligarchs organized it. Then why did they drag me to the morgue? No, it doesn't make sense. Then who am I interfering with? The girl couldn't understand. Maria had forgotten all about her cell phone, that she texted someone. The girl thought about being stuck in the morgue until morning. She didn't know what time it was either. I'm tired of singing, Maria said out loud. How can I pass the time? Maybe they'll bring someone in at night and I'll be discovered. And yet the girl could no longer bear the horrible odor. She stepped a little to the side and vomited. Maria felt dizzy. With all her might, she pressed herself against the door crack to try and catch some fresher air. I can do this, pounded in her head. I can take it all, whispered the pale lips. Hello, Maria. Hello, shouted Max into the receiver. But there was no answer. At first, there was complete silence, but then the distinctive sound of a blocked number was heard. God, what does all this mean? In horror, thought the guy. It could hardly be a joke. Since Maria can't speak, this text message may be the only hope of rescue for her. The young man quickly dialed his friend's number, but Martin was in the laboratory, engaged in his experiments, so he even forgot to take his phone out of his coat pocket. Called him 5 times already. What am I supposed to do now? Clutching his head, Max reasoned. I'll definitely call Detroit's police. The guy called the police and asked for someone to contact Detroit. Young man, are you kidding me? The voice on the phone said, I'm not laughing. What Detroit? What morgue? I'll make an administrative case against you now. The policeman swore and hung up. You understand, Maria can't speak. She's mute, the guy continued. But at last he got the dings and beeps, and he took his phone away from his ear. I have to do this, he said to himself and looked at his watch. I can make it in 12 hours if I go at full speed. Max quickly ran downstairs where his mother and father were sitting in the kitchen. The boy approached them with a worried look. I need to go to Detroit right away. I've got a friend in trouble. Probably, if I don't save him, he just won't survive. The son said quickly. As soon as I get there, I'll call you. And he ran out of the house. Max ran out after him. Father, what happened? He tried to stop the car, but the guy had already pulled out of the gates of the big house and sped down the deserted streets toward the highway. Just so long as she could hold out. Knocked in the temples of the guy Maria native and hold on, as if he tried to convey to the girl his thoughts. I will definitely save you. Max did not fully understand why this whole story had such a strong effect on him, but he felt very clearly inside that Maria meant much more to him than he thought. The boy was realizing some feelings that were new to him. He kept feeling that he had known Maria for a long time, but it was as if he had forgotten her. And now that she was in trouble, he remembered that. Maria, do I need you? Any thoughts in his head? God, what's happening to me? The boy said out loud, I don't understand anything, but I know one thing. I have to save Maria. Max drove in a straight line at full speed. The guy realized he could get a ticket, but he didn't care at the time. It was still in full bloom when Max's car pulled into Detroit. The guy didn't know where he should go now. He dialed 03 and called. Can you tell me where the morgue is in Detroit? He asked quickly. I have a friend locked up there. There was silence. The other end didn't know how to respond to the question. Are you trying to play a trick on me? The woman finally answered. I'll call the police now. I'll be very grateful to you for that. Max said tiredly. They refused to accept my call. Will you help me save a man? Or are you going to blame me? We have several of them. I heard a disgruntled reply. How do I know which one you want? The most unremarkable one. It was as if someone had asked through the boy. The one where a person can be easily hidden. Well, I guess a regional hospital wouldn't suit you, she reasoned. Bureau of Forensic Medicine, most likely also a center of ritual services. They usually have everything under control, except Detroit General Hospital. I don't have any other obvious options. How do you get there? The stranger asked hopefully. I just pulled into town where the big sign is. They have a morgue under the 7th building. The paramedic answered and gave Max detailed information so that he could get there. It was already light when the guy ran up to the door of the morgue. He looked at his watch. It was 8:30. He started knocking with all his might, but no one answered him. So he rushed into the emergency room and got everyone on their feet. "You're talking nonsense." The doctor on duty got angry. "Are you out of your mind? How could anyone be locked up?" And yet Max got his way. And in about 15 minutes, he opened the doors of the morgue together with the guard and the doctor. The guy entered the corridor and shouted, "Maria, you're here." The whole morgue was filled with an inhuman voice. "Maria, you'll lift all the dead." The doctor laughed hysterically. "I almost blew my hat off from your scream." But after a moment, there was a soft bang, as if something had fallen. Everyone went to the refrigerator. From there, the banging started. A minute later, the room was opened. From the doorway, a girl staggered out. "Maria," muttered her Max. "It's okay." He took her in his arms and carried her to his machine. "What a mess," the guard whispered. "What's going to happen now?" "Probably be put on trial." The doctor and the guard silently watched Max until he disappeared behind the hospital gates. "Maria, don't be afraid. Everything will be all right now," Max said. He quickly took something out of the glove compartment. "Write your address." He handed the girl a pen and some paper. "I'll take you home now, and then we'll decide together what to do." Maria worked something with trembling hands. The girl finally began to come to her senses and cried loudly. Her nerves relaxed a little and the stress started to come out. "It's all right, sweetheart," Max urged. "It's all right." He tried to calm the girl down. Maria abruptly grabbed a paper and wrote something. Max read that the girl asked to call her mother. "Hello, Nina." Quickly the guy realized. Maria is already fine. She is safe and sound. "My name is Max. I went to see her the other day with a friend about the engine from Salt Lake Satoya. Maria texted me to help her out. We'll be there soon." "Yeah, she's fine. I'll tell you all about it on the spot." Max tried to speak calmly, hearing the woman's hysterics. In a minute, they drove up to a high-rise building. There was a woman walking back and forth in front of the entrance. Maria, sobbing, ran up to the girl. "Maria, my girl, what happened to you?" "Nina, we can talk about everything at home," asked Max. "Maria has no strength. She better lie down for a while." The mother prepared for her daughter herbal tea with lemon. And the girl went to her bed. While she came to herself a little, Max told Nina Alexeyevna everything that had happened to him and who it could be. The woman looked at the guy in horror. "Max, I don't understand anything." "I don't either yet," sighed the guy. "Now Maria will come to her senses, and then we will write everything she knows." Max felt so tired that he just fell off his feet. He had forgotten all about his parents. Suddenly his phone rang. "Yes, I'm fine. I saved Maria. Someone locked her in the morgue." The son answered tiredly. "Let me call you later." "Maria who?" Shocked, questioned Mark Austin. "She was locked up in the morgue." "I don't understand anything." "Dad, please, I'll call you later." "I don't even have the energy to talk to you," begged his son Max. Maria fell asleep. The landlady came to him, "Come and you, and lay down on my bed. And then when you both wake up, we'll figure it out." The boy couldn't even resist. He just fell on the bed and fell asleep immediately. Nina settled down on the old couch. They all had hardly slept all that night, so they were completely powerless. It was probably around 2 o'clock when Max felt someone touch his hair. The guy immediately opened his eyes. Maria was sitting in front of him. "Maria, are you all right?" The guy jumped up. "Are you feeling better?" The girl smiled and nodded at him. Despite the fact that Maria had her voice back, she didn't want to tell anyone about it yet. And it wasn't that she didn't trust her mother or Max. The girl just wanted to deal with who wanted to kill her first and why. And in such a sophisticated way. Nina quickly set the table and they had lunch. After that, Maria took a piece of paper and started to write something on it. The girl described everything that had happened to her. "So you didn't see him?" Max asked. "Maybe even a glimpse of him." Maria shook her head negatively. She took a pen and wrote that she thought it was a man. "Maybe two. Judging by the fact that they brought her to the morgue, the bandits must have carried her in their arms. So let's start at the beginning," the guy suggested. "You were walking home. Somebody came up behind you and put something on your nose. A minute later, you passed out. What could it be? It's probably either. Maria wrote, "It's often used to temporarily incapacitate a person." Okay, you were sedated with ether, and then somehow you ended up in the morgue. Max continued to speculate. You wanted to make a phone call, but something happened to your phone. You only pressed one number on mine. You texted me for help. Then your phone died. No one came to see you, and you didn't see or hear from anyone. That's it. The girl nodded her head in agreement. Max and Nina looked at her in bewilderment. Maria, who could it be? Her mother asked. Do you have any idea? None. She wrote on a piece of paper, I don't know who it is or what Max stood up for. I think until we find out who did it and for what purpose. You better get out of here, get out of Detroit. Nina asked him. Max, but where? I don't have any relatives around here. We'll all go to Salt Lake City together, the guy suggested. I'll help you rent an apartment for a while, and then we'll see. Nina, do you realize this is serious? He looked at the woman who was trying to tell him something. Thank God Maria survived this time. But we can't take any more risks. The girl's mother was very afraid for her daughter's life, so she finally agreed. She and Maria packed all the necessary things, called her work, and explained that she urgently needed to leave for a few weeks. Then, everyone drove to Max's lab. Max carefully loaded the girl's invention and all the necessary documents. A statement to the police. We'll write it here, Max suggested. It's not safe to do such things here. Everyone got into the car and drove to Salt Lake City. On the way, Max took a break. Near a small town, a woman and a girl went to get water, and Max called his father. Dad, I need an apartment right away. I'm asking you, he said seriously. I'm taking Maria and her mom home. Max, what the hell is going on? The father shouted unhappily. What's with Maria, such a girlfriend of mine? Unexpectedly, the boy replied, I love her very much. You have a fiancé? Mark Austin asked in astonishment. But for some reason he didn't tell me and my mother anything. Dad, come on, please help me later. Cut the kid off. Give me money for an apartment for a couple months. I'm not bringing them home with me. All right, the man agreed. But only after you tell me everything. Max drove home slowly, making stops along the way. So they arrived in Salt Lake City early the next morning. Mark Austin sent his son an address that they could all go to together, but it would do for the first time. Took a look around the boys' one-bedroom apartment. Looks like it's got everything, so what do you got? I'll check in with you this afternoon. We'll have to go to the police and file a report. Maria approached Max, and from her eyes he realized that the girl wanted to thank him. Maria, the main thing is that you're alive, and the rest can be fixed. He looked into her glowing eyes. Max went home happy. For the first time in his life, he felt that he had done a very important thing. Max didn't feel like a hero, but he clearly realized that he was in the right place at the right time, and that made him happy. Suddenly, Max's phone rang, and Martin's phone number popped up. Would you have called me in another week? His friend said grudgingly. I almost died here, and you don't even want to know anything about me. Max, I'm sorry. I forgot my phone in the garage yesterday, Martin said guiltily. Anyway, it fell out and sat down somewhere, so I couldn't find it for a long time. What happened? Finally, he asked not me, but Maria. Quickly answered the guy. I rescued her. She's in Salt Lake City now, by the way. I brought her and her mother back from Detroit. Yes, I must have missed something important. Martin replied in shock. From now on, please elaborate. To say that the friend was completely bewildered by Max's story is to say nothing. Martin couldn't believe a word he said at first, but then he came to his senses and realized that Max had no desire to lie to him. What will happen now? Martin asked. Do you think she'll be hunted? Maybe someone wants to steal it. How should I know? Replied the friend tiredly. What normal person would think of such a thing? If they wanted to get rid of her or steal something, they probably would have done it already. But maybe it's a trick to get rid of her? The boy suggested. You know, not everyone can die from being in the morgue, Max replied. It's possible to go crazy, I guess. I don't understand his purpose at all, what he wanted to do. Well, let's say the idea was to make Maria go crazy, Martin reasoned. Then it turns out that all her designs are bullshit too. Or rather, life-threatening. But if you look at it that way, sighed the friend. Then yes, I guess, maybe. Then it turns out that Maria's invention is actually so important that in this way it can be discredited. But it seems to me that it would be easier to burn down her laboratory or kill her. God knows what they have in mind. With annoyance in his voice, replied the guy. Well, the main thing is that Maria is alive, and the rest time will tell. It was not far from Max's house, so he finished talking to his friend, promising to meet him tonight. And Apa. Hi. A guy ran into the house. I'm finally home. Dad, thanks for helping me with the apartment. But now then we can talk to you, looked at his son Mark Austin unhappily. Yes, now I'm ready, replied the boy and sat down on the chair. Ask me questions. I'll answer all your questions. Don't you want to tell us anything yourself? His mother looked at him in surprise. I thought you would want to tell us your secret love story. It's not secret at all, Max said. It's just that when we went to Detroit, I met the girl of my dreams. I mean, almost 2 weeks ago, you just met her. And today you've already brought her and her mother to Salt Lake City. Max's father said in anger, Are you out of your mind? Dad, what's wrong with you? I love Maria. The boy crossed his arms on his chest. Have I ever said that about any girl before? No, Mark Austin was honest. But how can you get to know a person in 2 weeks? Would you look at yourself first? The guy threw a grudge. How long did you know your mom when you took her to Salt Lake City? But that's a different story, the man said. And times were different then too. But why not? I'll even remind you, exactly 3 days, the son persisted. And what, you don't live well with your mom? No. Again, Max's dad had to admit it. We're talking about you now, not us. And what, in fact, what is the difference? The boy wouldn't give up. I love Maria, and she will be my wife. But you don't know her at all. Nickel intervened. You could at least ask us first, Mom, am I going to live with her? Not you. Coldly looked at the woman's son. So what do you care? But the problem is at least what you're going to feed her. Are you sitting on my neck yourself? Mark Austin threw down the ultimate trump card. And now you want me to feed your Maria? No, you don't have to feed Maria. She's a genius. Maria is a scientist, and she has inventions that will change all our lives, replied Max. Max, you amaze me. My father couldn't find the right words. So you mean to say that your girlfriend is doing science while you stand in nightclubs and spend your father's money? Are you serious? The guy said calmly. And for your information, I've been doing the same thing for a long time. The son couldn't take it anymore. We make hydrogen from waste plastic in the lab. You collect trash. Max's father couldn't believe what he was saying. I'm sorry, but I sure as hell can't believe it. How do you want it? Indifferently, the boy replied. Maria has invented a very economical hydrogen engine, and Martin and I want to build the world's first car based on it. Nickel, what kind of nonsense is our son talking? Mark Austin couldn't take it anymore. I can't listen to any more of this nonsense. Okay, Maria, in this I can still believe, but in the genius of our son. Alas, Max, you didn't write a single physics or chemistry test in high school. So what? But I know what hydrogen is and how it can be obtained by decomposing organic matter. I hope I don't have to explain to you that the polyethylene that's lying under our feet is an organic substance. The son said arrogantly. That's enough. The man grabbed his head. I've had enough of your hydrogen. I hope so. Do you remember that you gave your word that you would work for me after your diploma? So I'm looking forward to seeing you. I remember. Max replied grudgingly. You don't even let me forget about it. That's fine. Mark Austin rubbed his hands together. On this positive note, I propose to end our conversation. I will think about your Maria, he added and left the hall. Mania, at least tell him. I beg you. Looked at the woman's son. Maria is a very nice girl. Max, I asked you to finish the institute first, and then do what you want. His mother didn't listen to him. That's what the boy always thought. It's always profitable to be bad. But when you do noble deeds, they make you look like a real fool. What? They'd rather I drink and hang out in nightclubs. They don't know what they want from me. The guy was not happy. He went to his room. He wanted to get some sleep. After lunch, he was going to pick up Maria and go with her to Martin's garage. Besides, he had to take the instruments there. The girl wanted to continue her work, and Max didn't want to leave her alone for too long. I'm going to marry Maria anyway, he thought before. Falling asleep. It's all right, I can work on my own. And I don't need your money. Soon we'll have our own car and I'll have my own money. Maria. So Alex jumped out of bed when his guests left. It's been a long time since I've seen her. Nothing. I'll fix that, the guy whispered under his nose, closing the front door on the key. He quickly ran downstairs, and since he had an advantage over his guests, he could follow them quietly. What are you climbing up to here? The cousin was indignant, watching his cousin and his friend. I've been here with you for almost 3 hours. Finally, the boys turned the other way and went somewhere. After half an hour, they headed towards a cafe. They were met by a beautiful girl. Here is Maria, lost from joy hands Alex. But hello, very glad to see you again. After Maria came to herself, the girl began to be questioned by teachers and a psychologist about who locked her in the back room with the skeleton. The schoolgirl immediately pointed at Alex and William. The latter stood silently, lowered his head, and the former used anything to avoid admitting anything. What's it got to do with me? You ask William. Seriously answered the boy. It was like this. Maria comes up to us and says rumor has it that I'm the cowardliest in the class. But I'm not. Would you like me to prove it to you? I could spend all night with a skeleton. Will and I started to talk her into letting Maria go home. We took our backpacks and left. We never saw her again that day. Then why were both doors to both the back room and the classroom locked? The principal looked at him sternly. How do I know? Alex was indignant. Did you find the keys from me? You can ask your mother or father that we don't have them at home and never had them. After talking to his parents, the principal decided to remove Alex from the school. Drunken parents tried to wave their hands in protest, but the head of the school did not change his decision. Then Lyudmila decided to send her son to his mother. She, of course, was ungodly drunk, but the girl realized that she had nowhere to send her son. Alex's grandmother by that time already lived alone. A year ago, she had buried her husband. Nikolay had been struggling with her drunkenness for many years, and as they say, had worn himself out. He tried to breathe once, but couldn't. His heart stopped. The doctors said that a blood clot had broken off. His grandmother in the village did not watch Sashka in any way, so the boy began to suppress the last signs of empathy in himself by all means. At first, he shot birds with a slingshot. His favorite occupation was in the evening deadfall, sparrow counting. As Alex grew up, so did his amusements dying cats and dogs caught by the boy in traps, hanging by the throat on trees' neighbors' ducks, overflights and gasoline, and burned chickens and cats is a small part of the favorite activities of the boy, from which he enjoyed. But from time to time, he still remembered that because of some Maria, he had been deprived of normal living conditions. Of course, it was hard in Detroit, but at least there was food at home. In the village, my grandmother drank all the time. She didn't grow or cook anything. Alex quickly learned to steal money, but the neighbors began to suspect and complain about him. So the boy began to blame only one person for all his failures. Maria, in his fantasies, he always imagined her writhing in pain, screaming, crying, and calling for help. When Alex was bad, he always imagined it. Such pictures immediately lifted his mood. Time passed, and the boy Alex turned into a guy. He hardly finished 9 grades and lived his own life for a long time. Sometimes his mother came to the village. When Alex turned 17, his grandmother died. His mother did not want to take him to the city, even though he asked, no matter how much of a brute he was. But Alex realized that he could not survive without a job. Naturally, any education was out of the question. With age, Alex's hatred for Maria grew into hatred for his grandmother, mother, and all women. He simply despised them all. The boy dried his first glass of vodka when he was 11 years old. Then he lay unconscious in the barn for almost 24 hours after his grandmother died. He began to slowly adopt the family traditions. The kid sold everything he could get his hands on, He didn't work anywhere. Sometimes he was hired in the villages for some physical labor, when he had to carry something or dig. He didn't really want to learn anything. Neighbors tried to avoid him, despite the fact that Alex grew up and did not mock animals so much. He still showed his animal grin from time to time. Local people were afraid of him, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they learned that he was going to sell his grandmother's house and go to the city. When the boy was 22, a district officer came to him and told him that his mother and father had died. They participated in a joint drinking party in private sectors, and by morning they had all burned to death. Alex dreamed of selling his house for more money, but no one wanted to take it even for a penny. The house was old, it was a mess, and it had a reputation for being a mess. Finally, someone bought the house for very little money. It was just enough for a few months in town. And then there was the question of work. Alex worked as a loader, tried himself at the factory, but he did not want to work hard. One day, the guy saw an ad in the newspaper there in the morgue required an orderly. That would be interesting, laughed the guy. That's the kind of thing I like. He rubbed his hands together happily. So Alex began to work in the morgue. The doctor did not bother him much. And the work is not to say that it was difficult, no harder than pulling sacks. The guy thought after he started working there. Finally, Max and his friend left the cafe. Maria followed them. Alex continued to follow all three of them. So Maria has made it to the top, he whispered angrily. I've suffered all my life because of her, and she doesn't know any problems. That's okay, I'll get you back to your seat in no time. The plan flashed in Alex's head. As soon as Alex found out where Maria's lad was, his business was done and he was gone. From that day forward, the boy was working out his plan for revenge. I'll see what a genius you are. Alex laughed hysterically. Pour yourself more and more glasses. We'll see how you'll sing. If the skeleton made you speechless, I can't imagine what will happen to you. His laughter echoed through the apartment from the corpses. For almost a week, Alex had been imagining in his mind how Maria would be tortured in the morgue. He especially liked the ending. Maria, from fear with her hands, tries to tear her veins and leaves bloody marks on the wall. Then she senselessly falls to the floor and dies. 10 days later, Alex had everything ready. He waited outside the lab car all day. 3 months ago, he managed to buy an old car, which he now used to get to work. Putting Maria to sleep was no problem for him. The pathologist he worked with had told him everything in detail. After Alex had locked Maria in the morgue's refrigerator, he had discovered her bag in the back seat. Oh shit, cussed the guy. What am I going to do with it? Better throw it away so as not to attract attention. On the way home, he pelted the bag with rocks and threw it into the river. He made sure it didn't float up and, satisfied, drove home. All night, Alex could not sleep from the transportation of judgment. He felt so good. Pictures of Maria's suffering kept popping up in his head. A bottle of vodka helped him with that, and Alex's imagination went downhill with terrible force. Alex had 2 days so he could savor his victory. He had the weekend off. The next day, the guy kept waiting for a call to let him know what had happened at the morgue. But the phone was silent. Alex went to work. It's quiet again. Andrew, how's it going without me? Did everything go okay? With curiosity, he asked the pathologist. Yes, Alex, everything is fine. As always, calmly replied the doctor. To my great joy, there was no one at the weekend, so I was also resting on Sunday. The doctor and the guard who helped Max open the morgue agreed not to tell anyone about the incident. If there will be police to look for, then you and I will tell, suggested the doctor on duty. And if he took the girl, and that's it. Why should we get involved in all this? Alex's brain was exploding. He checked the refrigerator several times. He found nothing suspicious there. The orderly was not himself that day. Alex, are you sick? The doctor asked him. Are you not feeling well? You are all white as a wall. I did not understand the question. Alex, no, yes, tried to return him to reality. But then go home, suggested Andrew. It's okay, I'll manage without you. Alex returned home. He felt very dizzy. He lay down and tried to figure out what had happened. Maybe someone let her out, he thought. Then why haven't they said anything about it yet? It's a hell of a thing. But if the paper had died a long time ago, there'd be police at the morgue. It was as if she vanished, his head exploded. Maybe she's a witch? An unclean force? Her corpses helped her escape. Everything was becoming delusional. His thoughts were becoming delusional. The guy tried to come back to reality, but something was pulling him back again. He felt his temperature rising. The delirium started. He was thrashing around in his bed, all the time yelling something, "Maria, where did you call? Did he call for someone? I didn't kill her. Help, help, skeleton. Don't touch me, Mom." The corpses sounded through the apartment, unconnected to his words. It had been 2 weeks since Maria had filed a police report, but the case had turned out to be so convoluted that no one could still tell her anything. The girl lived in a rented apartment with her mother and worked in Martin's garage. Max was there all day long, too. Max got a call from his father one day. "I can't talk to you for days." "Where are you?" "I'm in the lab," he answered quickly. "I'm sorry, I can't talk to you right now. We have an experiment to finish." "All right," Mark Austin got angry. "Where is the location of your damn lab?" Max Moo quickly answered and hung up. He sat as a secretary and had to write down all the statements. An hour later, someone knocked on the garage door. Dad was puzzled and said, "Son, what are you doing here?" "Sorry, but this is a work environment. I just came to see what my son was doing," the man said loudly. "Mark Austin, come in," Martin greeted the guest. "This is Maria, so to speak, our brain. And Max and I are just insects compared to her. But hello, Maria." The man approached the girl. "I finally met you." Maria smiled and said nothing. The girl looked at Max's father with happy eyes. "And Maria can't speak," whispered his son in his ear. "She is mute against the background of childhood trauma." "Ah, that's what it is." Mark Austin sighed. "It's all clear to me now, but I won't disturb you." He turned and headed for the exit. "This is just what we need." The man resented him all the way. Not only did he not know where he had brought her from, but she couldn't talk. In the evening, Mark Austin called everyone to the council. He was serious about discussing his fiancé with Max. Can't speak Nicole opened her mouth in surprise. "Maria mute." "So what?" objected the son. "Does it matter that she can't speak? How are you going to communicate with her? The father didn't give up, and how are we going to talk to her?" "Well, I am communicating with her now, and very well." Max didn't give up his position, but it was too much. Mother protested. "I'm asking you to come to your senses." "All right," the son got up from his chair. "If you don't like Maria, then I won't live with you." He defiantly began to gather his things. "Max, are you serious?" Nicole said in shock. "And where will you live then?" "Well, with Maria and her mom," dryly answered the guy. "And when we collect the car, we will have our own money. Maria and I will live on it." That's how the father got up, and he thought about how we will look in people's eyes. "I'm a respected man in town. You're causing me so much trouble with your Maria." "Well, if it makes you feel better, you can disown me." "I'll take it, and I don't need your publishing house." "That's enough." The father shouted at the top of his lungs. "You're not going anywhere. But after the wedding, live with your Maria wherever you want." Nina had long ago realized that something was going on between her daughter and Max. She liked the guy, and it was obvious how he looked after Maria. Almost 2 months passed and Max couldn't take it anymore. He talked to Maria. The girl, very much embarrassed, took a pen and a piece of paper and wrote something on it. Yes, Max read, and with all his might he lifted his beloved in his arms. "Maria, I love you so much." Martin was very happy for his friend. He realized that with a calm Maria, Max would learn to control his emotions and would achieve great success in life. "Son, but maybe you should have defended your diploma first." Nicole begged her son. "But your Maria is not going anywhere. You've only known her for a few months." Mom sternly looked at her son. "At the end of May, Maria and I will be married. I will not change my decision." 2 weeks before the ceremony, Maria and her mother went home. The police called them, but the girl asked her mother not to say anything for the time being. "We found the man who locked your daughter in the morgue," the policeman said over the phone. Maria looked at her mother in horror. On the one hand, The girl very much wanted to know why they had done this to her. On the other, she had fear, perhaps due to Max or her inner strength. But the girl quickly forgot about the incident at the morgue as she left Detroit. After the police station, Maria and Nina were driving home in shock. They still couldn't believe what they had heard. The girl had wanted to tell everyone before the wedding that her speech had come back to her. But now she didn't know what to do. She loved Max, undoubtedly. But such intertwined destinies were very difficult for the mind to comprehend. Maria fell into a depression. "Maria, what are you doing?" Max asked her when she returned from Detroit. "You do not want to marry me?" "Max, I love you very much. It's not about you. I'm just really worried," she texted her lover. "Everything's gonna be okay." Her boyfriend hugged her and kissed her. "I won't let anyone hurt you again. I'm sure the police will call us soon and tell us that they found this criminal." "I feel it too," Maria wrote and looked intently into Max's eyes. Her gaze was full of love and tenderness. Max's parents hoped to the last moment that their son would come to his senses and give up this wedding. "Mark, I don't want him to marry Maria," the wife protested. "Well, if she had at least spoken. But it's such a shame, yes," only replied her husband. "What can we do? I'm not ready to lose Max for this. Let him have no bread. Maybe this will sober him up." If Mark Austin at least reasoned about his reputation, Nicole could not even say how she had such a strong dislike for Maria. The woman absolutely did not want her. The day of the wedding came, and Max's parents were going to it like hard labor. Mark Austin had to invite some very important people. Everything was going well. After the registration, everyone went to the restaurant. One by one, the guests began to express their congratulations and wishes. Finally, Nicole couldn't stand it and took the microphone in her hands. "Dear friends, we are very grateful to all of you." With annoyance in her voice, she said, "But unfortunately, the bride cannot thank you personally." Maria is not speaking. "Please excuse us." On the hall passed dissatisfied that the flow here and there. Mockery, reproaches, and caustic voices began to be heard. Maria could not stand it and got up from her table. The girl, to everyone's surprise, took the microphone in her hands. "Dear friends," the bride began, "it's true that I have not been able to speak for many years. And only one tragic and ridiculous accident gave me back my voice. And if Nicole had not brought up the subject, no one would have known that she had an indirect relation to my mother." Everyone, including Max, opened their mouths in surprise. The groom's mother was about to lash out at her future daughter-in-law, but Maria beat her to it. "When I was in the 4th grade, I was locked in the back of the biology classroom with a skeleton 2 classmates. I lost consciousness from fear. And when I came to my senses, I couldn't speak anymore. It affected the rest of my life. I couldn't go to a normal school anymore. And the worst thing for me was that I couldn't enter the institute I had dreamed of for so many years. But I didn't give up. I did science myself, and after a while I began to realize that my knowledge is much deeper than that of most university teachers. I began to deal with the technologies of the future not for myself, but for those who will come after us. And a few months ago, I was sedated and kidnapped when I was returning home from my laboratory. When I came to, I found myself in a morgue. For the first minute, I thought I was going to go crazy. I started to choke from a panic attack, but then it was like something lit up inside me. And I decided that no matter what, I was going to live. And I heard myself screaming at the top of my lungs. My voice came back. I'd spent most of the night singing in the morgue, but no one could hear me. I somehow managed to fall asleep in the morning, leaning against the refrigerator door. It was a little warmer there, and the smell of corpses didn't make me nauseous as much. My beloved Max had found me. But the strangest thing in this whole story is who did all this and why. The bride stopped and looked around at everyone present. "His name is Alex. He is my husband's cousin and Nicole's nephew. He is the one who locked me in the school with the skeleton. He's the one who brought me to the morgue to die. What did Max jump? Maria didn't tell me everything for some reason. I found out a few weeks before our wedding," the bride replied. "Unfortunately, when you went to see him, he recognized me. Alex followed you to see where I lived. He also knew where my lab was located." Nicole stood a pale woman. realizing that her nephew could have done this. She knew the story from her sister. Lucy had called her one day. She was sobbing that because of some girl, she now had to send her son to his mother. Naturally, the girl was drunk, and Nickel didn't believe her at the time. "I'll kill him." Jumped out of the table, Max. "Why did he do that? You bastard, I wouldn't let you do that," Maria said. And besides, God had already punished him. He went crazy and died a few weeks later. The police suggest that he saw me as the cause of all his problems in life. A quiet, gifted girl who drove him crazy, but whom he didn't love, but hated with all his being. Mark Austin approached his wife, Nicole, unable to contain her emotions. She cried loudly, "Well, you cannot be responsible for him or for your sister," stroked her on the head husband. "That's the end of your family's story. Nicole, let go. All of it. We need to move on." The woman came to her senses and approached Maria, where her mother was crying. "Maria, forgive me, please." Her mother-in-law rushed to her. "I didn't want you so much, but why couldn't I understand? I see now that Alex was my only link to my family. I intuitively supported him over you. My girl, I'm sorry, Nicole, it's not your fault." Her fiancé hugged her and sobbed. "Martin, I hope you didn't say anything to them." Mark Austin was worried. Maria has such an intuition that it's as if she knows everything in advance. Mark Austin, I'm sure that none of them guessed anything. His son's friend reassured him. The two cautiously jumped out of the publisher's office and headed toward a large bookstore with a huge conference room. Reporters, television, and some interested businessmen had already gathered there. "We're going to make some noise in Salt Lake City." Martin was rubbing his hands together. "Mark Austin, I'm going after them." An hour later, Martin's car turned towards the center. Maria and Max, tired from the lab, were on their way home. "Martin, where are we going?" Max asked him in bewilderment. "Do you need to go to the city center?" "Yes," the guy smiled enigmatically. "We're going to a place right now." "Max, but it's very urgent." The guys got out of the car and headed towards some hall. There were a lot of people standing there. "Martin, are the reporters shocked?" Maria asked. She wanted to ask something else, but Mark Austin ran up to her. "Maria, hurry up." He grabbed the girl's hand and ran with her into the depths. "I don't know what's going on here." Max was looking around. "Did they come to film us?" A friend guessed. Martin didn't answer anything. He just shouted Max forward. And he found himself in the center of the hall. "Dear friends," a young girl with a microphone appeared from somewhere. "Today is a historic day. We can equate it with the day Nikola Tesla presented his motor. And back then, it was a miracle. It was the first time in history that alternating current could be harnessed. Today, we want to introduce you to the heroes of our time. And as you may have noticed, among them is Maria. She's not a secretary or a lab cleaner. She is the most important brain who has created about 10 significant inventions. Today, we want to introduce you to our altruists closer and tell you what the guys have done to ensure a better future for all of us. We are sure that after our story, after everything we have heard, many people will realize that this is where we should invest our energy and money. New technologies will bring prosperity to our country, especially when not only men, but also women work on them.
Subscribe and click the bell. William stopped in front of the office. He took in more air and knocked on the door. Yes, he heard the energetic voice of the agency director. When he heard the invitation, he turned the doorknob and stepped confidently inside. The office turned out to be a large and bright room. Behind a huge, massive desk sat the director himself. He was a solid man in his 50s, with a kind smile. As soon as William saw the owner, he immediately realized that this was an intelligent and businesslike man who knew how to do business and loved money. That's why he was relieved in his heart. He would surely be able to make a deal with him. William came over, sat down on the table, and smiled broadly and said, "Good afternoon, Frank. My name is William, and I am here on very important business." The director's name. He read the plaque that hung on the office door. When William read the surname of the director of the holiday organization agency, he involuntarily smiled. Did Frank sit down? He thought it was funny. But now, the fate of the boy depended on this man. And so William did not delay and got straight to the point. I have a rather delicate question for you. You see, other agencies have turned me down. I'm relying on you. It's a matter of life and death. My fate is now in your hands. Frank, here's the thing. But before William could finish his sentence, he exclaimed cheerfully, "Don't even dream about it." William stopped talking in surprise and stared at the man. "Don't look at me like that. I know exactly what will happen next. Not the first year in this chair." And my answer, "No, sweetheart. My girls are not going to the bachelor party. Are you out of your mind to come to me? To the best children's party planner in the business. You're in the wrong place with an offer like that. We only do parties for little kids. No, of course, we can also congratulate an adult, but as an exception. And all within the bounds of decency," said Veselov. "Is everything clear to you?" Yes, I had no such thoughts, was surprised by the reaction from the cheerful William. "I just want to. We don't rent costumes either." Frank interrupted him again. "Again, we've had a bad experience. The only time I made concessions, there was one sitting here in front of me begging me tearfully. And what did I do? Pity the man. I have a kind soul, and people take advantage of that. I finally got my suit back. And what do you think? That William translated, not realizing what the story had to do with him. And that was it. The man waved his hands. They returned the costume of Little Red Riding Hood with a hole in the most delicate place. Can you imagine? He blushed with annoyance. And the girls then perform, so that he their costumes in front of children. So no. Young man, goodbye. I can't help you." And the man pretended to study very important documents. "Frank, wait a minute, you William. You were outraged, at least hear me out. I have urgent business, for which I will pay well. By the way," he looked seriously at once cheerful, "but please do not interrupt me. Outline." The man was interested. "I am ready to listen to you carefully. Here's the thing." Slightly embarrassed, spoke William. "I need a girl, an actress without a costume. Well, that's out of the question." Did he roar? And his eyes widened with indignation. They looked like they were about to pop out of their orbits. "Do you realize where you're going with a request like that? We only employ decent girls. They have families, husbands, children. This isn't a brothel, after all. What do you mean you need an actress without a costume?" Was Siva so angry that he even started stuttering? "Yes, calm down, Frank," William shouted. "You've got it all wrong again. Let me finish. I don't want a naked girl. But she doesn't have to be in a balloon or violin costume. Yeah, we don't have costumes like that, mistress. Did you sit in your nose? What kind of violin stables? But you understand violin suits, and fine, I don't want any. I want your actress to play the part of my fiancé." William was finally able to state his request. "I don't understand. Why? What happened to your fiancé?" You could see that since the jolly one was really curious. "Nothing. I don't have one at all. You know, my parents are really worried about it. And to calm them down, I told them that I have a fiancé, that I've been with her for a long time. And we're getting married. How was I supposed to know they'd want to come meet her? And in 2 days, they'll be here. And that I'd tell them there's no fiancé. That I lied. That's why I want to rent a girl." William said, and realized how absurd it all sounded. "Well, maybe you could ask some girls you know. Maybe someone from work." The director asked sympathetically. "I can't. I don't have any women I know." "Yes," did the strength. "Oh, this modern youth, but still cannot help you. There's no bride for hire service in the press. And the time is New Year's Eve holidays, matinees. All the girls are busy. We don't have any free ones, as they say. You know Christmas. Well, please, Frank, think about it. I'm prepared to pay very well, really very well. trying to persuade the cheerful William. A flame of greed lit up in the headmaster's eyes, but quickly faded, and he said in a firm, non-accepting tone, "I wish I could help you, but I can't. I'm sorry, and good day to you." Of course, from the cheerful Frank was very fond of money and would be only too glad to earn some, especially on Christmas Eve. But he was afraid that this young man might be bribed by competitors who wanted to ruin the reputation of his fine agency. Frank glanced again at the visitor, who continued to sit back in his chair, and begged to look at him some more. "And I repeat, I say again, there is nothing I can do to help you. Goodbye." William sighed and walked out of the office, immersed in his thoughts for 2 days, and his parents would be in his apartment eagerly awaiting to meet his fiancée. But he didn't have a fiancée or even a girl he knew. He was walking down the corridor and thinking how to find a way out of this difficult situation. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly in one of the offices. If William did not dodge, it would definitely crack him on the forehead. And a pretty miniature girl flew out of the room. She was in such a hurry, it turned out she couldn't see anyone in front of her. The young man said grudgingly, "Actually, it is possible," and more attentive. The girl took the phone away from her ear and whispered, "For God's sake, sorry," and then returned to the conversation. "How can it? You're a cab, which means you don't have any cars available. Let me pay double the price. I need to leave urgently. Do you understand or not? It's very urgent, very urgent." "No, I can't wait half an hour." She listened and looked at the phone for a few more seconds and said angrily, "What am I supposed to do if you don't have cars? What kind of day is this? Everything is upside down." After all, I was standing next to him the whole time listening to the conversation. Suddenly, he suggested, "Let me give you a ride. It's a long way." And the guy did not have time to finish the sentence because the stranger grabbed him by the arm and dragged him to the exit of the building. "God sent you to me. Please, young man, just take me. I'll pay you. It's very urgent." William didn't even resist. "Only on the porch," said the girl. "Wait, first of all, let go of my hand. I need to get my keys. And secondly, where do you have far to go?" "Not at all to me. There's a kindergarten 2 steps away from the bus stop, you know. That's where I'm going." William was surprised. The stranger seemed too young to have children. "Maybe a nephew." "Why do you need a kindergarten?" asked the boy. She looked at him with a surprised look, but answered, "My son called from the kindergarten. Liam has done something wrong again. I have to run, sort it out, about the territory. My name is Kathy, by the way," the girl said suddenly. "I'm William. Nice to meet you." Without taking his eyes off the road, the boy said, "Oh, William, here's the garden brake." Kathy shouted so loudly and so unexpectedly that William braked sharply. "Kathy, what are you doing? We could have had an accident." He shook his head. "Sorry, it's nerves," the girl said. "Every day there are some problems, you know. What about your husband? Doesn't he help you at all?" "But I don't have a husband." Kathy took a deep breath and got out of the car. "Thank you. You've been a great help. How much do I owe you?" "Oh, it's nothing." "Nothing." William hesitated half a word when he saw that his passenger was already running towards the kindergarten door. So of course she couldn't hear him. The guy was surprised at how nimbly she ran in her high heels, paling him on the sidewalk, jogging passersby. William had already started the cars, was about to move off, as suddenly the phone rang, called from work. So the man long and hard explained to his colleague where to find the necessary documents. And then he also took the same amount of time to find out why these papers were needed at all. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that it was not these documents that were needed, but others, and they were in the office of the manager. Finally, William finished the conversation and, throwing the phone on the passenger seat, wanted to move, but this time he noticed Kathy. She was holding the hand of a boy who was struggling to walk. The guy didn't realize how he opened the door and shouted to Kathy, "Come on, hurry up, I'll let you down." The girl began to look around, not realizing what was calling her. But noticing William, she smiled and led her son to the car with a quick step. "You're still here. I thought you had already left," the girl said, surprised. "No, I didn't have time. I was on the phone for a long time. And then I saw you coming back." The guy smiled, trying to see the boy in the rearview mirror. There was something about the kid's face, so William couldn't help but wonder, what's wrong with the kid's face? "He's just a little dreamer," he said of Kathy with a strange intonation. "What do you mean?" I asked in surprise, you see. And only now I saw the boy's face. It was streaked with green. Not all of it, though. Only his cheeks, chin, and forehead were covered with a hat. But from under it, a few more stripes of the same color could be seen. "Well, handsome," said William, barely restraining a smile. But when he saw Kathy's displeased look, he tried to be serious again. "So what happened?" he asked. The girl only opened her mouth to answer her, interrupted by the little boy. "Uncle, do you really like it? I don't pronounce it a little." Words mumbled the boy. It was obvious that he wanted to say something else. But his mother looked at him so sternly that Liam immediately changed his mind. "And what happened was that Liam found the markers with displeasure," said Kathy with the word educator. She was distracted for a minute, and in the minute he managed to color himself. But that's half the trouble. And here's what the parents of the two girls who were also waved all over their faces with markers have to say. I'm even afraid to imagine where he found them. William wondered. The girl sighed and said, "I don't know. I only know that the markers are alcoholic and it will be quite difficult to wash it all off. And it's on the eve of a matinee. Snowflakes with battle green coloring," said Kathy, and involuntarily smiled Liam. Seeing that the mother picked up and smiling, hugged her neck, and said, "You do not worry, they will be the most beautiful. It's a costume, Christmas trees. Look at me." And he pulled away from his mother so she could get a better look at his creation. "See, the green ones are the branches of the Christmas tree. And the toys Jenna didn't have time to draw me, and I drew them all flowers and balls. You know, it's beautiful." Kathy, looking at his son, only covered his mouth with his hand and slowly shook his head from side to side. William, driving the car, was laughing because he couldn't hold back any longer. "We'll talk to you at home," Kathy said, and looked at her son sternly. "Kathy, tell me the exact address." The girl named the street and the houses. The man exclaimed, "Yes, we are almost neighbors. I live 2 houses down. And you know what the most amazing thing is?" He looked at the girl in the rearview mirror and, meeting her questioning gaze, continued, "I've never met you before." She was about to reply, but her phone rang. "Yes, David." "No, I'm sorry. It slipped my mind. Can I do it tomorrow?" "But David, I got it. I'll be there soon." Kathy replied bitterly and disconnected the phone. She turned to the boy and said, "Liam, I'm taking you to Aunt Maria's. You can stay with her until tonight." "But I don't want to go to her." The child began to whimper. "Liam, I have no one else to leave you with. I have to go to work," she said. "Who is Aunt Maria?" William asked. For some reason, he liked the son and his mother very much. They were somehow real and alive, and that attracted him. "This is our neighbor," the girl quickly explained. "I leave my son with her when I have to go to work. In return, I help her, bringing her groceries, cleaning, cooking," clearly mumbled the guy. "And you have no relatives?" "No," Kathy answered sharply, and William realized that she was not comfortable talking about it. "I'm sorry if I offended you. I didn't mean to," calmly and quietly said the young man. "It's all right." Kathy also tried to make her voice more friendly. "Okay, William, our entrance is next. Thank you so much. You just saved me today," said the girl, turned to her son and commanded Liam, "Come on. Come out quickly. I'm already late. Can I give you a ride to work?" Suddenly, William asked, without expecting it of himself. "I wouldn't mind," Kathy wondered. "Don't you have anything to do?" But it turns out that it all smiled the guy. So I'm waiting for you. Yes, of course, she said. She took her son by the hand and with a quick step walked towards the entrance. The boy was funny, sitting next to him and barely keeping up with his mother. William looked after the couple and smiled involuntarily. 15 minutes later, Kathy opened the front door and got into the car. Shall we go? Unless, of course, you've changed your mind. No, of course we're going fast, William said. Back to where we met you. She remained silent and just nodded, leaning back in her chair and covering her eyes. But William couldn't drive in silence. He wanted to find out as much as he could about Kathy. So he asked, "What do you do for a living?" She hesitated for a moment. The question stumped her, but she soon answered. To be honest, it is difficult for me to answer this question unequivocally. Actually, I'm an accountant at David's firm. But that's officially. And unofficially, I am a secretary and cleaner and sometimes even an animator. She said and sighed sadly. How is it an animator? Surprised William. I think you came out of the office of the cheerful director of the holiday agency. So my boss, David and Frank, childhood friends, explained. Kathy was silent for a while and then continued. Sometimes when the fun one has a problem with the animators, my boss kind of rents me out. So here I am entertaining the kids in different costumes. She was quiet again for a minute. What did you do of the fun stuff? Did you want to book a party? To be honest, I don't recommend using his services. His girls don't drink much. He skips out. And they might steal something. No, we didn't have a deal. I had a rather delicate request for him. The guy said, "What was it? If it's no secret." Of course. Kathy looked at William in surprise and added, as if apologizing for her curiosity. Don't get me wrong. It's just that, knowing the man's level of greed, I'm very curious what you offered him that even the cheapskate refused. She laughed. It's just that we all know that if you're fun for money, you'll do anything. You see, I wanted to rent a bride. William tried to answer as casually as possible, but in his opinion, he failed. I mean a rented bride. Why? Kathy didn't even try to hide her amazement. It's simple. My parents think I have a fiancé. They're coming over in 2 days to meet her, but I don't really have one. Well, then tell me you don't have a fiancé. Why complicate things? The girl asked. William thought for a moment. He didn't understand how to explain to his new acquaintance that his parents loved him very much and were incredibly worried that he was still alone. The thing is that if my mom finds out that I don't have a fiancé, she will start matchmaking the daughter of her best friend again. But this girl is not my type. William took a deep breath and remembered Natasha, whom his mother tried to match him up with every chance she got. How messed up is that? Kathy stretched, trying to hold back a laugh. The new acquaintance seemed to her a serious, determined, and courageous man. Therefore, this situation seemed to her funny and even somewhat childish. How he is such a strong man cannot explain to his mother that he is not ready to start a family. Kathy, well, really, nothing funny, said William, and a little resentfully. You just don't know my mom. Well, yes, said Kathy. By the way, did you offer out of funny money? Is he grasping for every dime? Yes, of course, replied William, and briefly recounted Kathy's conversation with the agency director. Okay, Kathy thought for a moment. And tell me, please, what will your fiancé have to do? Your mother will not check how serious your relationship is, will she? Well, that is, the meeting will be without intimacy, right? Asked the girl, trying not to laugh. Well, of course not. Not even a sleepover. Mom thinks that Helen and I do not live together yet. With who? Helen. Excuse me, Kathy. Yeah, that's the name of my fictional fiancé, according to legend. Got it, she said, and then she paused and said, Listen, leave your phone number. You helped me out today, so I'll try not to be indebted either. I'll try to talk to my friend, but no promises. I'll call you later. Tonight's the night. Kathy, I'll be very grateful to you. You're so helpful. William was glad because he didn't believe that his question would be solved somehow. He dictated his number. Kathy wrote it down and hurriedly left the car and ran towards the building. William decided to go shopping and buy gifts for his parents. A few hours later, Kathy literally persuaded her friend to help her new acquaintance to live. "I'll do it. Come on, don't you need money? Moreover, the guy is cool, calm, and a great car. Kathy, if he's such a great guy, why don't you go yourself? You'll play the part of the bride, and you'll make money. I think you and Bones could really use it." "No, what did you say to Kathy?" She actually really wanted to play the part of William's fiancée, although I didn't understand why. But she was scared, probably because she really liked the guy. So why not? My friend wouldn't let it go. I can't have a life, especially with no one to leave Liam with. Kathy was lying. Imagine if I come to the meeting with a child, William's parents will definitely not be happy that their future brides already have a son. Why don't you go? You're pretty, he's cute. Maybe it'll work out. Kathy, no, I can't. We just made up with Ben yesterday. Kathy sighed. She knew Nancy loved her boyfriend, but they were always fighting and making up. And if they were in a reconciliation period now, it would be impossible to talk her friend into it. She gave up. "Okay. Sorry, of course," Kathy said quickly, hearing the menacing expression in the receiver. "I'm really glad you two made up. I just wanted to help that guy so badly. I thought you'd agree." "Well, what's the problem? Help him yourself." "Nancy, I almost yelled at you, but I said I can't." "Kathy, think of a better excuse to convince Kostya to the neighbor and run to your William," Nancy said sternly. "Well, first of all, he's not mine. And secondly, Maria can't sit with Liam. She's busy." Kathy was blatantly lying. "I wonder what sort of urgent business that old woman might have. I've never hated a friend's roommate in my life." So she said those words with a little bit of anger. "Nancy, how should I know? She doesn't report to me. She said she couldn't. So if she can't," Kathy cut her off. "And when you say you need a bride, then play in 2 days." Nancy spoke quickly. "Look, you're lucky. We've got Ben's day off, and we'll take him to our place, especially since Liam loves my Ben. And the boy needs to socialize with men." That sentence almost brought Kathy to tears. Lately, she often heard that her son just needs male company. But where could she get that companionship? Kathy didn't know. Liam's father had never seen him. The girl dated him for a short time. It was her first true love. But it turned out that the man was just on a business trip and soon left town. When Kathy found out that she was pregnant, she tried to find him, but she could not. True, Nancy then found his page in the social network, but it turned out he had a girlfriend. He'd been in a relationship for a long time. And with Kathy, he was just having a brief affair. She decided to forget about this man, but Nancy persuaded to write to him and tell him about her pregnancy. The girl decided to, but he did not respond immediately, nor after a day, nor after a month. Kathy understood everything and did not bother him anymore, deciding to raise her son alone. Of course, the doctor and her friend asked her opinion about the turnover, but the girl firmly decided that she would give birth. Then Nancy said, "You know, I was sure you wouldn't have an abortion. But I had to ask you. Don't worry, I'll help you. You're the closest thing I have to a friend." She added in a quiet voice. Kathy and Nancy had been best friends since kindergarten, always visiting each other. Then they went to school and the girls' lives began to go through a rough patch. First, Nancy's dad was found in an alley with his head bashed in. But it was not like a banal robbery, because the money, wedding ring, and a nice watch were in place. The investigator had many versions of what had happened, but Nancy's mom didn't believe in any of them. She was so distraught with grief that she lost track of time and fell out of reality. The woman completely stopped paying attention to her daughter, and Kathy's parents felt very sorry for the girl. "Kathy, if Nancy wants to spend the night with us," said Molly, Kathy's mom, "just tell her to tell Mommy. Mommy, are you the best?" Kathy exclaimed, hugging her mom. When Kathy told her wife that she could spend the night, she was very happy. She could no longer stay with her mom all the time, who was starting to turn to the bottle more and more often. She would get drunk and start blaming everyone for her husband's death. And worst of all, she threw nasty things at Nancy. It would be better if father were alive, and you were gone in tears, her mother shouted to her. Mother, what are you talking about? Nancy tried to contradict her somehow, but she quickly interrupted her and kept shouting at her, throwing more and more accusations. Nancy loved her mom and felt sorry for her. She missed her cheerful father and their close-knit, happy family. She didn't want to believe that the old life was over. Nancy was having a hard time coping with the loss of her dad from her mother. There was no support. So Kathy's parents' suggestion actually saved her. Thanks to Kathy and us parents, Nancy was able to move on with her life. But she always waited for her beloved kind mother to be the same as before. It made her run home every day after school to check on her mother and tell her about herself. But every day her mother's condition was getting worse. She was sinking lower and lower. She was not interested in what was going on in her daughter's life. So the girl's heart was torn to pieces. Despite this, Nancy studied well, did well in school, and was just a great good girl. At the same time, everyone at school knew that her mom was constantly drinking, and she herself lived with her parents, a friend. But nobody interfered in her life. Kathy. Her parents dressed her, bought everything she needed, and even gave her money for school needs. Nancy realized that without them, she would definitely end up in an orphanage. She was grateful for their support and care. In fact, strangers to her people. Therefore, the girl tried to please them in any way possible. She always helped her wife around the house, cooked, cleaned, and did everything they asked her to do. Nancy, you must be tired. Come on, go and have a rest. Molly used to tell her, but she only told her aunt. Natasha, it's not difficult for me. I'm only happy to help you. And she said it very sincerely. She wanted to thank her saviors, but she couldn't do it any other way. When the girls were 13 years old, Kathy's father died. He was a young man of 42 years old who just didn't wake up one morning. There had been a cardiac arrest. At this point, Nancy was terribly worried about Kathy's mom. She had already seen the woman break down and sink after her husband's death. She was terrified that Molly wouldn't make it either. But Natalia didn't break down, but instead pulled herself together and kept her composure. At her husband's funeral, Molly didn't cry, but she only feigned calmness so as not to scare the girls and show them all the despair and pain. Then she withdrew from Kathy and Nancy and began to disappear to work all the time. Nancy took over all the housework. She cooked, did laundry, checked. The girl had almost stopped visiting her own mother because she had hit rock bottom and turned the apartment into a brothel where there were constantly many strangers to Nancy. Kathy had a hard time accepting her father's death. She withdrew into herself. She cried a lot and read a lot. Of course, she loved books before, but now they became her constant companions. Books helped the girl to detach herself from everything and be transported to a fairy tale world where there is no resentment and pain. She lived other people's lives together with the heroes of the novels to forget about her loss. Those around her could not understand how such completely different girls could be friends. Kathy was a romantic, completely unadjusted to life. And Nancy was a simple girl who, for her 13 years, managed to face a lot of problems and successfully overcome them. But fate is a strange thing, and she tied them with a strong thread for many years. But the girls' lives continued. They finished the 9th grade. Nancy went to study to be a hairdresser, and Kathy wanted to study until the last grade and go to university. But still, she decided to go to the vocational school that her friend only to become an accountant. After all, in her class, she had only Nancy, and Kathy did not communicate with anyone else. When the girls entered the school, Nancy quickly made friends. She was cheerful, and everyone liked her. Kathy, on the other hand, could not find a common language with her classmates. Kathy, why did such a handsome guy wanted to meet you today? Nancy stretched out, lying in her bed at Kathy's house. Yes, but she was already embarrassed. Kathy, I told you I don't want to date just anyone. I want to fall in love once and for all, like in romance novels. She rolled her eyes dreamily. Nancy understood her friend and accepted her for who she was. She loved Kathy very much and was grateful to have this person in her life. The girls started working part-time jobs early on. They were promoters, picked fruits and vegetables in stores, and went to the fields to pick strawberries or dill. During this time, Kathy's mother had little interest in the girls' lives, but she kept them fully provided for. It wasn't uncommon for Molly to come home late at night or go out on weekends. Kathy, I used to ask Mom where she was all the time. She said she was working hard. The girl trusted her because she was sure her mother didn't drink. She never smelled of alcohol. But the girl noticed some oddities in the woman. For example, she began to dress differently. One day, Kathy met a neighbor who asked, "Kathy, Mom's not sick." "No. Why would you think that?" The girl was very surprised and a little frightened. "It's just that I saw her with some people who were all in white, and I thought she was with the doctors," the neighbor answered. And after thinking about it, she added, "Okay, she's not sick, and that's good." Kathy was excited about talking to the neighbor, so she quickly went home. The girl wanted to talk to her mother, but she was not home. In the evening, she told her friend about her worry. "Kathy, be sure to talk to your mother," Nancy said worriedly. "Strange people in white outfits." The girl agreed. She, too, didn't understand who these people in white the neighbor was talking about could be. That same evening, when Molly came home, the daughter started a conversation with her mother. But as soon as she heard about the people in white coats, she immediately became nervous and told her daughter that it was none of her business. "You know I've been pulling you and your friend alone for years. Tell me, do I ask you questions?" "No, you stay out of my business. It's my life, you understand," Mom almost yelled at Kathy. Then she grabbed her jacket and ran out the door. "Mom, where are you going?" Kathy tried to catch up with her mother, but when she ran out into the street, she was already out of sight. "Kathy, I went back to the apartment. On the doorstep was waiting for her upset Nancy." "Kathy, Molly's right. She's been keeping me for a long time, even though she shouldn't. I guess I'm a guest. Let me go tomorrow." "Where are you going?" Kathy was crying. "It's impossible to live at your place. Stay, it doesn't matter. I'll sort it out somehow." "Nancy, don't pay attention to what your mom says. I don't know what's gotten into her. She really loves you, and she's glad you're staying with us. Don't leave me, Nancy." Kathy cried harder than ever. "That's it. Just don't cry." Nancy put her arms around her friend and began to stroke her head. "I'm not leaving you. I'll talk to Mom tomorrow, and we'll work things out through the tears," the girl said. They talked most of the night and fell asleep only towards morning. They wondered what would happen in the future, dreamed, and in the morning they quickly left for college. The girls were not worried that Molly did not spend the night at home. It had happened very often lately. But when they came home from school, they sounded the alarm because Kathy's mom was still not home. "Nancy, is it just me, or did Mom never come?" Kathy stretched out. "Yes, I think she never came either." Nancy had already gone to the kitchen and noticed that nothing had changed there either. There were dishes in the sink from the morning. No one else had eaten, and the fridge was untouched. Kathy did not answer her friend. She quickly ran to her mother's room. The bed had been dispatched. All the things were in their places. The girl opened the closet doors and breathed a sigh of relief when she saw all the clothes hanging. She was afraid that her mom had left home, resentful of her. After that thought, Kathy had another thought in her head, and she quickly grabbed her phone. She dialed her mom's number, but it was disconnected. "Nancy, the phone is off." Kathy sank to the floor. "What if something happened? I'm really scared." "Well, calm down. It doesn't mean anything. The phone could just be dead." Nancy tried to speak as calmly as possible. So, what are we gonna do? Where do you think she might be? We have to make sure she's okay. Kathy couldn't calm down, so she peppered her hand with questions. Hey, do you have Molly's work number? Maybe check there. Nancy, it's evening. Kathy objected. What's the point of calling work? Well, look, you and I stopped by Molly's work. Remember when she forgot her phone? Nancy tried to help her friend. Now, remember, there was a guard booth on the first floor. Kathy nodded. And if we can't get through to your mom's office, we'll call the booth there. Agreed. Asked Nancy. But I don't have the guard's cell phone. That way we can find him easily. Your mom has a notebook where she writes down all the phone numbers she needs. I think I saw her in the hallway. Answered Nancy and quickly ran to find the notebook. Come on, take the phone. Calling the office, and I'll find the number. Kathy took the phone, dialed her mother's number once more, but it was still unavailable. Then she dialed the phone number in Molly's office, but no one answered. This was not surprising since it was almost 10:00 p.m. Well, asked Nancy, who had just returned from the hallway. Kathy answers me. Mom became the head. Let's call the guard. I found the number for the gatehouse. What am I going to tell them? Nancy looked at her friend thoughtfully and smiled slightly. Kathy was like that, kind, reliable, smart, but completely unfit for life. Okay, let me make the call myself. Nancy picked up her phone and started dialing the number of the walk-in from her notebook. After a couple seconds, she heard a stern male voice. Hello. Nancy was startled by the man's gruff tone, but she quickly pulled herself together and said good evening. This is the builder. That's right. Is the office closed now? Will it open at 9:00 a.m.? The security guard said quickly and was about to hang up. But Nancy reacted quickly and shouted, wait a second. Hold on, please. 1 second. Don't hang up. What is it now? Well, my mom is your chief accountant. Started telling my wife. And today, she did not come from work. The girl tried to explain everything to the guard as accurately and quickly as possible. You know, I'm really worried. Can you tell me what time she left work and whether she was even in the office today? The man hummed and said, You know, girl, I can't give you such information. I'm not allowed to. Man, well, please, I'm really worried. It was Nancy's mom who almost cried. The girl's excitement was transmitted to her friend, who clung to the phone. On the other side, well, all right. Speak the name, your mom's name, her position. The man on the other end of the wire took pity on the girl. Molly is the chief accountant. As quickly and clearly as possible, said Nancy, and waited for an answer. A rustling of paper came to the girl. Apparently, the man was leafing through a magazine and repeating under his nose, so. Listen, friend, said the guard, switching with the girl on the first name. Something you got mixed up. We don't have any working for us, and the chief accountant's name is different. What's that? The girl was surprised. Check again. You've definitely had a good look. For some reason, the man was angered by her words, and he said angrily, What do you want me to do? I actually wanted to help you, and you so stretched the guard. I think I realized you were sent by someone to play a prank on me. Or is Sebastian testing me? Come clean. Then the man started cursing and yelling loudly. Nancy was frightened and hung up the phone. The girls sat in silence and looked at each other. After a while, Nancy said, The security guard said that Aunt Molly doesn't work at their company, and the head accountant's name is something else entirely. I heard that, Nancy, replied Kathy very quietly, but I don't see how that can be. I mean, she was taking money from somewhere. Nancy only helped her head in reply. Nancy, and so for Mom. I'm afraid, said Kathy in a whisper and wrapped her arms around her knees. First of all, let's calm down. What do you mean, let's calm down? Kathy screamed. Mommy hasn't been home in over 24 hours, and I have no idea where to find her. Kathy, let's go to bed now. It's getting late. We'll go to the police in the morning if your mom doesn't come back. But suddenly, she has a fiancé. Here she is in his living room. Nancy tried to convince her friend. True, she herself didn't believe what she was saying, but she really wanted to support Kathy. What was life like for them? Through tears? Asked the girl. She would have told me, warned me. Well, maybe she was afraid to tell you. After all, you loved your daddy so much if it was Molly and was afraid you wouldn't accept her new man. Kathy, I began to calm down thanks to my friend's words. The girls got into bed and started discussing Kathy and Mom's disappearance. I fell asleep unnoticed. As soon as Kathy woke up, she immediately ran to her mom's room to see if she was back. But everything in the room was the same. The bed was still sent out as well. Nancy, Mom is still not here. Let's go to the police, said a frustrated Kathy. Yes, of course we will. What else are we going to do? Immediately, her friend replied. The girls started to pull their jackets on, but suddenly Kathy's phone rang. She took it out with shaking hands and saw that the screen said Mom. It's Mom, Kathy said anxiously. Well, answer it, Nancy said hurriedly. But she saw that her friend was in shock, so she quickly grabbed the phone and shouted into the receiver. Molly, where are you? It's okay, Molly. The girl is not Molly. Nancy, I heard an unfamiliar voice. My name is Miranda and I'm. Who are you? Where did you get your mom's phone from? She grabbed my wife's phone and started yelling at her. What's wrong with her? Where is she? Young lady, if you'll be quiet for a while and listen to me, I'll tell you everything. Okay, I'm sorry. Kathy tried to calm down and control herself. My name is Miranda. I'm a nurse at the regional hospital. Tears ran down Kathy's cheeks, but she continued to listen to the woman. Yesterday, a woman was brought to us unconscious and without papers, so we couldn't talk to her or identify her. We recently found a cell phone in her things and just now charged it to the phone. And I found a number that's signed as her daughter. So I'm calling you. Yes, thank you very much, Kathy said quietly. That with my mom, they'll let me in to see her now. You see, she's in serious condition. So I can't tell you whether you can see her or not, but you must come to the hospital. We'll expect you in an hour with your mother's documents. Yes, of course, agreed the girl. Well, she is in the hospital with her mother. And with Nancy's sprinkled questions, as from the horn of plenty. Yes, in the regional, answered Kathy, and recounted to her friend the whole conversation with the nurse. Well, what are we standing here for? Get dressed. Let's go. Nancy, I handed Kathy my jacket, but suddenly I realized and took off my shoes. What are you doing? Where are you going? Kathy asked me in surprise. We didn't take the papers. The girl quickly found Molly's passport, medical card, policy, and other documents in the drawer. She knew exactly where the papers were. In the apartment, there was a special drawer there with various documents. She kept her passport there as well. Upon reaching the hospital, Kathy dialed her mother's. The phone number was disconnected again. The girls did not know in which ward Molly was lying, so they had to spend a lot of time to find out. When they found out, it was too late. Kathy's mom had died without regaining consciousness. Upon hearing this news, the girl froze. She couldn't scream or cry. She just sat down and stared at one point. The wife did not understand how to support her friend, what to say to her, how to find the right words, and what could be said to give a person hope when he lost his closest and dearest soul. She just sat next to her friend and put her arm around her shoulders. A short time later, the girls learned that Kathy's mom had thrown herself in front of a truck in an attempt to commit suicide. The driver reacted quickly and managed to swerve to the side, but still hit Molly tangentially, and she flew into the guardrail. Then the truck driver called an ambulance and went with the victim to the hospital, but the woman died. Kathy could not come to her senses and could not understand why her mother had done that. Neighbors whispered behind the girl's back. Some said that Molly was in a cult, others that she had gone crazy after losing her husband. When her mother died, Kathy had a difficult period. She was not afraid to go to an orphanage because soon she was going to be 18 years old, but she couldn't get used to living without her mother. Despite the fact that they almost did not communicate with her mother, For many years she was at ease with her, and now she was gone, and it was getting very scary and painful. If Kathy did not have Nancy, she would not be able to survive. A year had passed since then. In time, the girl accepted it and calmed down. Kathy worked in her specialty, gaining experience, even though she received a small salary. Nancy got a boyfriend, Ben, and they started renting an apartment together while she bought suitcases. They were both crying, and she told Kathy, if you need anything, call Good right away. Kathy nodded, the other wiping away her tears. She really didn't want to be alone, but she couldn't keep her friend around forever either. Soon Kathy also met a guy and immediately fell in love with him with no memory. It was after this short relationship that she became pregnant, and it turned the helpless Kathy into a grown woman who learned to solve her problems on her own. Kathy, are you sleeping in there? Nancy stretched out, pulling Kathy out of her thoughts. So, bride-to-be, are you going to play? Yes, said Kathy, not expecting it. She heard Nancy's enthusiastic voice and smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Kathy, you certainly remembered everything. William was very afraid that the meeting would not go as planned and his parents would figure it out. And if that happened, his mom would start fainting. Or should I make a scene? Daddy will blame his son for not raising him that way, and men don't do that. And if James's older brother finds out about the deception, it's going to get really bad. He will remind the boy for a long time how he introduced his parents to a fake bride. William took a deep breath and looked at Kathy. She smiled and quickly retorted, My name is Helen. I am 24 years old. I work as a translator for your company. Okay. And no one will decide to test me on my language skills. The girl asked excitedly. I guess not, William thought. No, they definitely won't. Not Mom, not Dad, I don't know. If James were coming, he might. But he won't be here. His wife's about to have a baby. So it'll be all right. Kathy looked William in the eye, smiled, and continued, Your mom. Evelyn. Your father, Peter. Good for you. I approve more, the boy said. What's the best thing to talk about with your mom not cooking? Kathy replied quickly. Your mom really likes to cook. So if she hears the name of a dish, she'll want to cook it right away. That's right, said William, looking at his watch. But talk to your dad about everything. But don't argue. Just keep quiet. Agree. Okay, sure. So, then everything's fine. My parents are gonna be here any minute, so let's speed it up. Breathe in, breathe out. I wish you all the best of luck. Yeah, good luck, Kathy muttered quietly. Her anxiety was growing by the minute. She was beginning to regret getting involved in this venture, but she realized that she was doing it not for the money, but because she really liked William. Besides, Kostya liked the man very much. He kept talking about his uncle, who drove them home, and asked when he would come to visit them. The guest uncle just gave us a ride. We can't invite him to visit, hugging the boy. Kathy said, It's a pity. I wish I had a daddy like that. Kathy's son stretched out, dreamily closing his eyes. Oh, I forgot all about the champagne. I'll go get it from the fridge. In the meantime, you sit back and calm down, William said. On his way to the kitchen, only William left the room. The doorbell rang. Kathy, go open the door, shouted William. I'll be right there. The girl went to the front door and took a deep breath, counted to 3, and opened it. The landing was dark. She could hardly see the man standing in front of her. He was standing half sideways, so she couldn't see his face. Kathy naturally thought it was Papa William. So she loudly said, Hello, Peter. I'm Helen, William's girlfriend. Come in, William. I'm in the kitchen now. Where is it? But she did not have time to finish the last sentence because she saw the face of the man standing in front of her. It couldn't possibly be William's father. Hello, Helen, he said with a smile. I'm James, William's brother. And then the light from the apartment hit the man, and Kathy got a full view of the guy. The girl was speechless, but quickly regaining her senses, she shrieked, You, James was surprised and began to stare hard at the girl's face. When he recognized her, he cursed softly and then whispered, "What are you doing here?" "Hi, James. You've already met my fiancée." Just then, William came back from the kitchen. "Her name is Helen. How did you get here? You weren't supposed to be here. Where are Mom and Dad?" Kathy didn't know how to act at all. She was just in a stupor. Of course she wanted to meet James again and get in his face for doing this to her. But at the moment, she couldn't figure it out. What was the right thing to do? If she started a scandal right now, she'd be setting William up for a lot of trouble. Especially she didn't want to make a fool of herself. James, too, was out of it, unable to control himself, gave Kathy a stern look and turned to his brother and said, "I'll tell you later how I got to you, but for now you go downstairs and help your parents with their suitcases, and you carry their things. Your elevator's broken. I'm gonna rest. Your girlfriend can get me some water. James, water. I'll help my parents." William quickly kicked off his shoes, threw on his jacket and ran out of the apartment. Kathy looked up at James. She gathered her thoughts, sighed, and wanted to start talking. But no sooner had she opened her mouth than he drove her against the wall and began whispering fiercely in her ear. "Look, I don't understand what you want and what your plans are. How did you even erase your trust in my brother? But I'm not gonna let you deceive him. I was just scaring you, Kathy." She didn't expect that reaction, so she didn't know what to do, which is just, "What do you want from me? How did you even know William was my brother? Did you just decide to finish the thought?" He didn't have time because he heard footsteps and voices outside the door. James stepped away from Kathy just before the door opened, but the girl couldn't move from the shock and just stood there against the wall. "Why are you still on the doorstep?" William asked in surprise. "I thought you had already eaten at the table." "Helen, what are you doing? What's the matter with you?" "James, are you scared? Don't worry about it. It's only at first glance." Formidable tried to joke William, trying to spank the girl from the wall. "Yes, it's all right," James said cheerfully. "We just had a deal." Helen was so interesting. "How did you two meet?" "Hello, Helen. Will you tell me how you met the wall?" Evelyn intervened. William's mother had already disrobed and undressed. She took Kathy under her arm and led her into the dining room. The girl was very confused, but she tried not to show it and answered all the questions. William's mother. William did not understand what was happening to Kathy, but he could not get his head around it. His father and brother, right from the doorstep, started pouring out all the news and telling him what interesting things had happened on the way when everyone sat down at the table. The boy tried to ask Kathy what had happened to her. He whispered, "No one has seen it yet." "Kathy, what's wrong with you? Did something happen?" "Yeah, I'm fine." The girl tried to smile. The atmosphere at the table was beginning to irritate. Peter was making a lot of jokes. Kathy laughed at his jokes and answered a lot of Evelyn's questions in parallel. The girl seemed to have calmed down, but she tried not to look at James. True, he himself tried to get on her nerves as often as possible and asked her stupid and sometimes hurtful questions. She paid no attention to it. But William was getting very angry. "James, I don't understand what's wrong. Why are you always clinging to the line? Honestly, I would have thought you liked her if you didn't have a pregnant wife." "I couldn't take it anymore," William said. "Well, why wouldn't I?" "Maybe I did," James grinned. Everyone fell silent, and there was an awkward pause. Evelyn decided to lighten the mood and began to tell interesting and funny stories from William's life. "Imagine," Helen calmly said, "Mother Vida, when Patenka was very small, he Mom, carelessly tone," said James, interrupting to describe the writing mother. "You'll have time to tell more about William. Let's find out more about Helena. We don't know anything about her." "Say Helen." He said that name with a special intonation. "Why do you want William? What's so special about him?" And we're all curious. Have you ever been married? Maybe you have children. That sentence was the last straw for Kathy. She would have stood for a lot of things, but not that. It was a terrible bullying on James' part to bring her up with children, so his words made the girl feel very hurt. Kathy jumped up from the table and ran out into the hallway. She hurriedly tightened her jacket and tried to fasten it. She couldn't do the latter. She began to cry with despair. William's voice came to the girl, and almost immediately he appeared in front of her. "Kathy, don't go. James just had too much to drink. He's just talking nonsense," William said quietly. "Stay." But she was crying, so she didn't want William to look at her. She didn't want to tell the boy what had happened. William understood, moved close to the girl, touched her cheek, and wiped away her tears. Then he took her chin and looked her straight in the eye. She didn't resist. She raised her head and looked into William's eyes too. The guy couldn't help himself and gently kissed the girl's lips. It was a completely innocent kiss, but it stirred up a lot of emotions in her. It was as if he relieved the accumulated tension, allowed Kathy to forget about everything and calm down. All that was left was lightness and a sense of flight. William pulled away but was still too close, so she could feel his hot breath. It made her body run with goosebumps. "Please don't go away," William said quietly, in a husky voice that noted the striking notes in it. "After all, I'd better go." The girl tried to come to her senses more quickly and convey confidence in her voice. "You, apologize for me to my parents. Tell them I got sick. You have a good mom and dad. I don't want to hurt them, especially since I've already played my part. I gotta go." While the girl was afraid to change her mind, so she quickly turned around and already went out into the entranceway. But William suddenly said, "No, one thing I definitely will not let you go. Wait, I'll warn my parents and see you off." She did not argue and was rolled against the wall in the entryway and began to wait for William. Through the open door, the girl could hear William saying something to his parents. His mother's voice reached her, arguing and speaking in a slightly annoyed tone. "We can all go now," William said as he stepped out into the entryway. He was already dressed. Yes, the guy and the girl walked out of the entryway in silence, but William wanted to know what had really happened, so he tried to start a conversation. "If you want, can we call a cab?" he asked. "I'm not going to drive. You know, I've been drinking, but let's walk. I need a breath of fresh air. James hurt you. To be honest, we don't understand with his parents what's wrong with him today. Maybe something happened. He's not making any sense at all. What's he saying?" Kathy asked quietly. She realized that William's brother could say some nasty things about her. Of course, she knew that she and William had no future, but she didn't want the guy to treat her badly. She liked him a lot. "Well, for example, when I was leaving, he said, 'You're cheating on all of us. Anyway, James thinks you're not who you say you are.' Pull the William. You know, he said it so confidently, like he knows you're not my girlfriend. Because he does know." Kathy answered almost in a whisper. William looked at her in surprise and stopped. "I don't get it. How could he possibly know that? Do you know him?" Kathy didn't want to answer, so she just kept quiet. But the guy didn't relent and kept pelting her with questions. "Well, why didn't he just say that you two knew each other? Was there something between you two?" "Because wait," the girl touched up to the guy's shoulder to reassure him. "I don't really think your brother wants you to know that. We didn't have a very pleasant encounter. I'm sure he's regretted a bunch of times that your dad's car broke down and he had to come over," Kathy said. "After all, I'm right that if your dad's car hadn't broken down, James wouldn't have come and recognized someone posing as your fiancé. If it hadn't been for that accident, none of this would have happened." Kathy tried to gather her thoughts, at which point William said, "Kathy, why didn't he just pretend he didn't know you? As I recall, you didn't throw a fight at him. Or did I miss something?" "Of course not. I didn't lash out at him. I was actually shocked when I saw him. I'd be less surprised if it was like Brad Pitt." "Why Brad Pitt?" The guy smiled slightly. Well, I just like Brad Pitt and his name came to mind, quickly said Kathy. But that's not what this is about right now. Got it. So tell me, how do you know James? Look, why don't you let him tell you? The girl didn't want to talk about her affair with James. She hated to remember how stupid she'd been a few years ago. I'll talk to him too, don't worry. But right now, I want to hear your side of the story. As far as I can tell, it's not a pleasant story. So I'd like to hear both sides of the story. Kathy exhaled loudly, clenched her fists, said James. Bones' father. What? William shrieked loudly. Passing by an old lady with a dog on a leash, even jumped with fear and said loudly, "You are not ashamed." Young man, you can't behave like that. I beg your pardon. William replied sharply. He was not interested in being polite and wanted to know the details. William stared at Kathy in silence, and the old woman, who had recently been frightened by the boys shouting, began to come closer and closer to them. She was curious as to what they were talking about. Kathy noticed this and relented. The woman, with an annihilating stare. The granny gave the girl a displeased look and grabbed her chit in her arms and carried her away. I told you that our history of acquaintance with James is not the most pleasant, Kathy said in a calm tone. But I didn't expect this, either, said William, who had recovered from the shock. But I don't understand how. How can he be the father of the bone? I mean, he lives in another city and doesn't come here. There's just no way. The guy started to shift to screaming again. He was having a hard time keeping his cool right now, and there were many reasons for that. He liked the girl so much that he even wanted to ask her out on a date or invite them and their bones, for example, to the circus or to the Christmas tree. What the guy found out changed everything. He did not know how he should act now, how to behave. And in general, the news that James has a child, which he does not bring up, was in itself shocking. For William, his brother had always been an example and authority. But such an act held James back in William's eyes. William had always wanted to look up to her older brother. James was a cheerful, athletic build with great ambition. But the fact that he abandoned his own child undermined James' authority completely. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. You didn't tell me how we met, the guy reminded him. He was afraid Kathy would go home now and he'd never find out. I literally fell at his feet quietly, said the girl. Well, how about a little more detail? They were almost at Kathy's house, and William began to realize that she was just stalling and didn't want to say anything. But he couldn't just let her go. My friend Nancy asked me out on a double date. Her boyfriend Ben was supposed to bring his friend. The girl started the story. She'd been wanting to set me up with someone for a long time, but I hadn't said yes. That day, I finally gave in. Kathy sighed heavily. We went to a club, and this guy at the club had a few too many drinks and started hitting on me. And then he dragged me to the bathroom. Well, you know what for. Freak, William gritted his teeth. He was terribly angry at the girl's story. His face was twisted with anger. Yes, I agree with you. Kathy, I couldn't see William's face because it was already dark outside, so she didn't pay attention to his condition. That's what I told him then, and then I decided to leave. Nancy wanted to walk me out, but I said I'd call a cab. And I wanted to walk. I was wearing terribly uncomfortable shoes, long stilettos, so it was very difficult for me to walk. I almost made it home though. And I was just passing that store. Kathy turned around and pointed William toward the store they had just passed. The boy nodded as a sign that he understood. My heel got stuck between the tiles. I twisted my foot and started to fall. James was just coming out of the store, but of course I didn't know that was his name at the time. So he helped me up and offered to walk me home, Kathy said. And William just listened silently. He walked me home, and we stood talking for a long time near the driveway. Then Ben offered to have coffee, but I didn't invite him in. He walked me out, and we stood chatting for a long time. Then James offered to have coffee, but I didn't invite him back to my place. So we went and got takeout coffee and went back to the driveway. We chatted some more, and I went home. Then Ben called me, asked me out. We went to a movie, then to a cafe. And so began our brief romance. The girl finished dryly. They were already standing just outside her house. She wanted to close the door quickly to finish this unpleasant conversation. And then what happened? William persisted. You'd have to ask your brother. I think you'll like his version better. Kathy turned around and wanted to go into the entryway, but William grabbed her arm tightly. Please tell me what happened next. She looked him straight in the eyes, in the lamplight. He saw that there were tears in her eyes. He realized that she did not want to tell him anything more, that she wanted to run away, to hide. But he couldn't let her go because it was important for him to know the truth. He tried to ignore the girl's tears, which rolled down her face in large drops. The boy repeated his question. Kathy, what happened next? Next, you wondered. What happened next? Shouted the girl and pulled her hand out of the man's hand. What happened next was the happiest months of my life, you know. I fell in love with James, and I was willing to do anything for him. And I was sure he would love me back as much as I loved him. But it turned out I was wrong. I was so stupid, and he took advantage of it. The girl covered her face with her hands, turned away from William, and cried harder. The boy was silent. He didn't know what to do. He realized that the girl would not go anywhere and would tell him everything. But now he was worried about something else. He couldn't deal with his emotions. William wanted incredibly badly to give in to the urge and hug her. This fragile and helpless girl. He wanted not just to hug her, but to hold her with all his strength and comfort her like a little girl. He would certainly have given in to this impulse if it had not been about his brother, but about some other strange man. But unfortunately, the girl was telling a story about James, so William had to make an effort not to hold her against him right now. He just hid his hands in his pockets where he clenched and balled his fists. It helped a little, distracted him, and calmed him down. And then 2 months later, James was gone. Kathy continued the story. Her voice had changed a lot. It sounded muffled and detached. Tears were no longer running down her cheeks, and her face was pale and frightened. You see, the man I loved just disappeared without saying a word to me. She spoke in a cold voice full of pain. I called him all day, all night, and another day, but he just disconnected the phone. I almost lost my mind. I was afraid that something had happened to him. So I went to the police, but they just laughed at me. They said my lover was just fed up with me. So he disappeared. Do you know what the worst part is? Kathy looked William straight in the eye, that after the words of the police I came to my senses. I started to realize everything. After all, I didn't know anything about this guy I'd been seeing for the past 2 months. I didn't even know his last name or where he worked, for example. William couldn't believe she was telling this about James. He had no reason not to trust Kathy. The boy could see the pain in her eyes as she told her story. William believed her, and he was getting really nasty. So disgusting he wanted to go to the showers to wash the filth off himself. Well, anyway, I was completely depressed. I didn't want to live. I couldn't work. I couldn't eat. I couldn't leave the house. All I could do was lie there and stare at the ceiling. If it hadn't been for Nancy's support, I would have done something to myself. Kathy wrinkled her nose as if her patriarchy was howling at these horrible events. And soon after, I found out I was pregnant. Kathy, I apologize, of course, for that question. Are you sure Liam is James? William said it and immediately regretted his words. Kathy changed abruptly. She looked at the boy with eyes full of hatred, her face twisted with anger. The girl pulled out and gave Veda a ringing slap of evil, saying at the same time, "Male solidarity is right," shouted Kathy. "I don't care if you think your brother is white and fluffy. That's your business. But you asked me to tell you everything. And I told you as hard as it was. It wasn't for me. I'm sorry I met you and agreed to help you. Goodbye." She quickly turned around and ran toward the entryway. "Kathy, "Wait," shouted William. "I didn't mean that. I'm sorry." But the girl had already run to the entrance and slammed the door behind her. Kathy got to the apartment and opened the door with the key. She sank to the floor right in the hallway and began to sob as loudly as she could. She was utterly desperate, and she was really, really hurting. William walked home, immersed in his thoughts. He blamed himself for saying words that hurt the girl, but there was no way he could fix it. Besides, he tried to think about the future conversation with his brother. The conversation would definitely have to take place. The boy would not be able to sleep until he heard James's version of what had happened with Kathy. William walked into Evelyn's apartment. She had already put everything away and washed the dishes. She was now sitting in an armchair watching her favorite show. Peter was sitting on the couch, dozing. James was nowhere to be seen. "So how badly did Helen resent James?" asked worried mother. The boy did not understand who his mother was talking about, but then it came to him. And William said, "No, she's fine. She's just a little sick. But to be honest, I'm totally shocked by my brother's behavior. Yes, son. I don't know what happened to him. He was different. I tried to talk to him afterwards, to find out what was wrong with his behavior, but he wouldn't tell me anything. I mean, he said something, but my father and I didn't understand. All right, Mom, I'll talk to him myself. Go to bed. You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you?" "Yes, of course we are. We're driving a serious car, and his girlfriend's due soon. He can't be away for too long." The mother said her daughter-in-law's name in a special tone of voice. She was never able to accept her son's wife and love her. Well, she kind of accepted her. But here the daughter-in-law was shy mother-in-law and avoided communicating with her. The guy did not know what exactly happened between his mother and Emily and never got involved with questions. It was none of his business, and now he didn't bother his mom, kissed her cheek, covered with a thin web of wrinkles, and said, "Okay, Mom, I'll go. Good night. Lead the way, please, but don't swear, James. Remember, he's your brother." "Yes, yes, of course," replied William and smiled. He did not realize that he would soon forget that he was related to James. William entered the room and saw that his brother was already asleep on the bed. He couldn't and didn't want to wait until morning, so he started to wake him up. "James, wake up." William shook his brother by the shoulder. He opened his eyes, tried to focus his gaze on William, and said, "Get off me. Let me sleep." "No, James, come on, get up. We need to talk." "What conversation?" "Just James trying to sit up in bed. And yourself do not guess about your behavior, about your attitude to my fiancé," replied William. The guy did not call the girl by name, so that his brother could tell him everything. "Listen, this is your favorite bride, Helen. It's not Helen at all. Her name is Kathy, and I think she has a kid." James answered, "Really? How do you know that?" "Well, about the name and the baby," William asked in a surprised tone. James gave his brother a confused look. He realized that he had said too much, but he wanted to protect William from this girl's deception. In truth, he didn't want to talk to his brother about it at all. "After all, I do not want to go into details. You just need to take my word for it that this girl is not your match at all. But I'm serious." "No way, James," William said. "No way. I want to know everything from the very beginning to the very end, from the story of your acquaintance to the moment why you left her pregnant." As William walked home, you were still hoping that James didn't know about Kathy's pregnancy, but now, looking at him, he realized that his brother knew everything. He didn't understand how James could leave her so easily and not be involved in his own son's life. "All right, if you want to, I'll tell you. But I have a condition." James grinned. "What's that?" "Not my parents, not my wife, can't know about this." William thought for a moment, then said, "Okay, I promise I won't tell." He didn't want to tell anyone himself. His parents would be very upset about it. And he didn't want to ruin his brother's family because his wife was about to have a baby. "But I'm waiting impatiently," said William. "How long are you going to keep quiet?" Come on, start talking. Don't rush me. Let me get my thoughts together, said James thoughtfully. I don't know where to start. Well, tell me, for example, where did you meet? And in general, how did you end up in this city? You have no idea, James said with a laugh. You really don't remember. You moved here and bought an apartment. And about a month later, I came to this town. Do you remember when Emily's father opened a branch of the company here and asked me to supervise? I remember, William nodded. Okay, that's taken care of. Now let's get on to getting to know Kathy. Did you know that my introduction to Kathy was your fault? James smiled. If it hadn't been for you, I never would have met her. I don't know what you mean, my fault. But it was you who sent me to your apartment late at night to check on the repairs. That's the day I met Kathy. William remembered that when his brother had come to visit, he had actually asked him to check on the apartment several times. At that time, William had just moved to this city, but he had prepared for the move in advance, found a job, bought an apartment, started to renovate the apartment, but did not have time to finish it. The company management demanded that he go to work, so William hired a team of builders, and they began to finish his initial repair. The guy himself stayed in rented accommodation for the time being. William all the time disappeared in the office, so there was no time to check the work of the masters. Then James came to town, and William immediately told him that it would not be possible to stay in his apartment because of the repairs. During the time James was in town, William only met him a few times, but James often checked his brother's apartment at his request to keep an eye on the workers. One day, William asked James to check on the apartment late at night. He got a call from a neighbor telling him that something was going on there. Loud music was playing. Girls were laughing and a speaker was working. This alarmed the neighbor, so she called William just to warn him. After all, I couldn't get away from work, so I asked to check my brother's apartment. Apparently, that's the day he met Senia. But what did you remember? James smiled, watching William's reaction. He nodded. Yeah, I guessed, probably when I went to check on the apartment after the neighbor called. Let's say you met Kathy. But it's not like I made you drag her to bed. A little angrily, William said, you were getting ready to get married at the time. And anyway, I thought you were really in love with Emily. Love with Emily, James started to shout hysterically, but quickly lowered his voice so as not to wake his parents. What love? What do you even know about our relationship with Emily? I myself have never understood why you with this girl talked, William, who always hid his attitude to his brother's chosen one. No, she's certainly a beautiful, showy girl, but it's as if she has no soul in her. I remember that you never showed any sympathy for her. So you were surprised when you decided to get married. Surprised? James stretched out. Why did I suddenly decide to go out with her? I didn't have the wit. William shrugged nonchalantly. It was strange to him that his brother was talking to him that way, and that there was so much irritation and anger in his voice. The longer the brothers talked, the more questions William had. James's story was not yet clear. He wanted to know more quickly. Tell me that the money had made him sound squeamish. Yes, dear brother, you wouldn't believe it, but you guessed right, James said with a chuckle. To be exact, my father-in-law did everything. So I had no choice. I got so deep in business with him that I just couldn't get out, James clarified. Looking somewhere through his brother, he was silent for a few moments, thinking for a moment, then continued. William realized that his brother, who had always been hiding something, had finally decided to speak up. He just couldn't keep it all to himself. James remained silent for a few minutes, thinking, gathering his thoughts, and then continued again. The first time I met Emily's father was at her birthday party. We were at her house. There were about 15 people there. At one point, Emily's dad came over, and the guys started going home. It was just me, Emily, and about 4 other people. He saw us drinking, but he didn't say a word. He just sat down at the table and asked for a clean plate to eat his dinner. I wanted to leave too, but the birthday girl tearfully asked me to stay. So, giving in to her entreaties, I stayed a little longer. James said in a calm voice, and then exclaimed, "I was a fool. If I had left, my life would have been very different." James, "Oh, don't give me that." William waved him away. "As usual, you have everyone to blame but yourself." The boy didn't even try to hide his irritation. It hurt him that the image of the perfect older brother was crumbling before his eyes. And he was also disappointed that now their relationship with his brother would forever change for the better. William was sure of it. "Okay, look, why don't I just leave it at that?" James grumbled unhappily. He'd hoped his brother would be supportive. But William wasn't going to sympathize with him. So James went on with his story. "Okay, Nick's presence made us a little uncomfortable at first, but as time went on, we relaxed. Emily's father talked to us, asked us all kinds of questions, and we answered him. The conversation was quite relaxed. He asked me where I was going to go to college. At first I didn't want to answer, because I was sure that I wouldn't be able to get into the university I dreamed of. But Nick wouldn't back down, so I told him everything. He grinned strangely and left the room. And when he came back, he had a sheet in his hand, on which he asked me to write down my information. Name, phone number, the date of birth. I did as he said, and gave the sheet back. I finally got accepted, and that's when it hit me. That Emily's father helped you get in. William interrupted his brother. "Yeah, sort of," James replied. "To be more precise, I was helped by a friend of his, who was a rector at the university. He and Nick used to go to the sauna on Saturdays. After that, he helped me with my job too." "How? You said you were lucky. You won some competition, and you were offered the job," William said in surprise. "What else was I supposed to tell you?" "I just wanted Mom and Dad to be proud of me and think that I'd achieved everything on my own," James said quietly. "And I was thrilled that I was able to get into the institute of my dreams. Then I got a good, high-paying job. I even started dating a girl, Anna, whom I liked very much. But it was not as easy as I thought." "What do you mean?" William wondered. "I believe that I was just lucky to meet such a kind and influential man as Nick." Ignoring his brother, James continued to speak, "But then I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Emily's father, who asked me to come to his office. He said he had something urgent to talk to me about. I went, of course, because I had no idea what was going to happen next." There was silence, but William already knew how this story would end. He couldn't believe that James had really gotten himself into such a terrible mess. William was an honest and upright man, and was sure his brother was the same. But this filth that is part of his brother's life came as a shock. James wanted to finish the story quickly, so he continued. "When I arrived at Nick's workplace, we had an interesting conversation. He asked me how I felt about his daughter, if I liked her, and if I would like to date her. I replied that she was a nice girl, and I felt great about her, but immediately told him about Anna, that I was in love with her and we were dating. He reacted to my response with resentment, saying that his daughter has been going crazy for a long time, and he would love it if I dumped my Anna and started dating Emily. I tried to explain that this is impossible. I only see Emily as my friend. I talked for a long time trying to make it as friendly as possible, but Nick wouldn't listen. Anyway, at some point Nick changed the subject and started asking about my studies and work. I told him everything was great, and he replied that it would be a pity if I was expelled and fired. To his words, I don't understand. Also objected that I have everything excellent in the institute and at work. For what reasons could I be expelled and fired? He only then grinned and wished me luck. About a week later, the instructor tried to fail me on an exam. He asked questions that we had not studied at all during the semester. Money went missing at work, and the shortage was pinned on me. I understood why it was happening, and I didn't want to go along with Emily's father. You could have asked your parents for help. So what happened? Where are we and where is Emily's father, who owns a big business and knows a lot of powerful people? Don't be ridiculous, Will. Are you exaggerating? William tried to object. I don't think your father-in-law is as omnipotent as you describe. No, brother, James said with a chuckle. Maybe I'm understating things, but I'm certainly not exaggerating. I didn't realize what an authority figure he was before either, but now I know what extensive connections and influential friends he has. So do I go on, or are we going to argue? Go ahead. Anyway, after that conversation, I started having problems. I was trying to keep up, and I was torn between my uni job and Anna. When I was almost out of energy, Nick called me again. He asked me how I was doing, how my studies were, how my job was, asked me to come up to his office again. There he offered to help me, that he could work things out. But in exchange, I had to go out with Emily, and he had one condition. Emily must never find out about our arrangement. I didn't want to agree honestly, but I was well aware that if I refused, Nick would get to me for good. James was silent for a moment, and then said in a quiet, calm tone, "Do you know, William, what was the hardest thing for me to do?" "What?" "Dumping Anna. I really liked her. I've never felt that way about anyone before, but I chose money, career, and comfort." With a slight chuckle, said James, "You have nothing at all for Veronica." William was important to know that. Well, how can I put it? James stretched out. I don't love her, but she makes me feel safe and good. No fire, no passion. It's hard for me to explain. It's just a habit. We live and let live. But if my father-in-law hadn't encouraged me to get involved with Emily, I never would have started seeing her. William sighed heavily. He hated hearing all this, but they hadn't gotten to the hardest part of his brother's story yet. "All right," William said. "I think we're clear on Emily. But wait, there's something else I want to clarify." "What?" James looked at his brother in surprise. "Don't be shy. I'm asking. It's her night of revelations, so you can find out anything you want to know. Why didn't you just leave Emily? I mean, you had some problems and you were separated. Why did you go back to her if you didn't love her? I think that's when you started getting ready to get married." "So much. Why?" James muttered. "I don't know why. I guess I just got used to it. To her beautiful life, to her lack of problems. I realize that as soon as I leave her, I'll be fired from my job, and I'll lose everything I've worked so hard to achieve. My father-in-law would never forgive me. I was trapped. Emily did a lot to make me want to leave her, though. Then one day, she changed. Started being jealous of me at every post, checking my social media accounts, calling me hysterically all the time. But I never had a chance to change her. We were always there for each other. I only left for work. If I started an affair there, someone would immediately knock Nick," James muttered. "Well, then I don't understand how she let you go on a business trip for 2 whole months. It's just a coincidence, I guess," my brother replied. "I didn't expect to be so lucky at all," the man said. "The stars have aligned just right. First of all, I didn't ask for this trip. Nick sent me. He loves his daughter, of course, but she tries not to argue with him. Secondly, she couldn't come with me because her father had just found her a great place to build a beauty parlor. She has long dreamed of her own business, so she could not miss such an opportunity. After all, it was necessary to quickly draw up the documents and start making repairs, and Emily wanted to control the whole process from start to finish. Anyway, she agonized for a long time, but decided that everything would be all right. She couldn't miss the opportunity to realize herself and show everyone that she could do everything herself. Got it. She fulfilled her dream. As far as I know, her salon is doing well," William clarified. "Yes, it's doing well. But that's not her fault. It's Nick's," James said, waving his hand. "But that's not what this is about. I left for this town, and Emily's been calling me almost every hour to check on me, to see what I was up to. She wanted to come over a bunch of times, but I kept calming her down. It wasn't very far away, so I drive myself to see her. And then things kind of settled down. She got busy with the salon, so she just didn't have time to control me. That's where Kathy came in." "So, You met her and immediately decided to cheat on your girlfriend. I interrupted my brother, William. No, of course not. I wasn't going to cheat on anyone. It's just the smell of freedom. You know, it's a bonding experience. The first time I saw Kathy, she was upside down, trying to keep her balance, you know. Well, she's got a nice ass, so I couldn't resist. I decided to help the lovely girl. William was silent. He listened attentively to his brother, but he didn't like the words that Kathy had a nice ass. It made him feel something unpleasant. James didn't notice the change in his brother, so he just continued with his story. When Kathy changed, I saw that she was okay in the front too. Nice face, nice breasts, waist, legs all on her. That's how we got it going. James smiled. And you know what struck me most? Said William in a lost voice, who realized that his feelings of resentment and hatred for his brother were growing more and more. She was a virgin. James laughed, emphasizing the last word. I couldn't believe it when she told me. I thought she was just putting on an act. But when we got to the point, and I realized she wasn't lying, I was very. But James didn't have time to finish, because William jumped up and punched his brother. James hadn't expected such a turn, so he didn't even have time to dodge. The fist hit him squarely in the jaw. That's why there was blood coming out of his lip. "What are you doing?" shouted at the top of his voice James. "You'll be quiet," William whispered angrily. "Are you out of your mind?" James asked, surprised by his brother's behavior. William said, holding out a handkerchief to James. Whereupon I said, "I'm not at all. I'm just shocked that you, my brother, played with a girl and then left her pregnant. How could you do that? I thought my brother was a real man who could take responsibility for his actions." And he was. William waved his hand at his brother and headed out of the room. "And you're so right, aren't you?" James grinned, pressing his handkerchief to his lips. "I'm just a normal person, living the way my parents taught me, and I don't do anything mean. I don't understand why you're so full of shit," William said hatefully and walked over to his brother. He didn't want to talk to him, but he had to know everything to the end. So he asked the main question. "Tell me, did you know that Kathy was expecting a child?" "I didn't know anything when I left," James said, touching his lip and wincing at the pain. His jaw ached terribly, blood was coming out, and James was angry at his brother, at himself, and at Kathy, who was to blame for everything, according to the man. "When you found out she was pregnant, after a while she somehow inexplicably found me on social networks and wrote honestly. I was shocked when I saw her message. I mean, she didn't even know my last name. The SIM card, the number of which she knew and immediately threw away. It was a working, simple phone at work, said that I lost it. They gave me a new one. Why'd you run away? You didn't even call her or break up with her like a real jerk. And when you found out she was pregnant, you didn't contact her either. Why not?" Yours again. Why did James get angry? You're asking why. What could I possibly have said to her? I don't know, William said in a near whisper. You could have at least said a proper goodbye instead of just disappearing. Do you really think that's what she wanted? With a chuckle, James answered, wincing at the pain of the blow. Probably not. William shrugged. But when she told you she was pregnant, why didn't you contact her? That's what I don't understand. So what? What difference would it have made? James asked harshly, looking his brother straight in the eye. William just shook his head, and James continued. Exactly. It wouldn't have changed anything. I wasn't going to break up with Emily, so I didn't answer Kathy. I'd had a good time with her, of course, but that wasn't it. With her, I felt like a student who couldn't afford luxury gifts for a girl. She glowed with happiness when I brought her a crumpled rose bought in the underpass, or offered to drink coffee and eat a hiked dosha. But I didn't want to live like that. Emily and my father-in-law showed me a very different life, a more expensive one. I guess I would have understood you and could justify you somehow, said William. But I will never understand how you could not even ask about your child's fate. Stop, James said with a chuckle. Actually, I only knew about the pregnancy, the baby, and she didn't tell me. Kathy disappeared and never wrote to me again. That's why I thought she'd had an abortion. Shut up, William threw. I don't even want to hear it. You're just a coward and a moral freak. I'm ashamed that you're my brother. William left the room. The apartment was already quiet. Apparently, the parents were asleep. The guy tried to walk as quietly as possible to the corridor, took his jacket, and went out into the entrance. He didn't want to stay in the apartment. He needed a breath of fresh air immediately. This conversation had ruined his relationship with his brother, most likely forever. Kathy sat on the couch, holding the bones in her lap. They were looking at the multicolored lights on the Christmas tree. The girl was sad. Christmas was due in a couple hours, and Kathy was trying to understand. Why was she feeling so homesick? It hadn't been a bad year. Liam had hardly been sick at all. She'd gotten a pay rise and life had gotten a lot easier. In fact, she understood everything. It was William and his sneaky brother who had spoiled her impression of the past year. She regretted having met William because it made her have to remember one of the worst events in her life. After Kathy had slapped William back, she thought he would never appear in her life again. But that turned out not to be the case. He called her all the next day, but she didn't pick up. He kept calling and calling. So Kathy just blacklisted him. But that didn't help the girl calm down either. She wanted to get away from sad thoughts and heavy memories, so she looked at her son and asked Liam, "What do you think Santa Claus will put under your Christmas tree?" Kathy already knew the answer to that question. Liam dreamed of a railroad, but the one her son really liked cost too much. The girl simply could not afford such a purchase. But fortunately, she had a best friend who was happy to help Kathy out. "What's the matter, Kathy? Aren't I adding money for my godson's dream?" Indignantly, Nancy opened her wallet and added the missing amount to Kathy. The girl couldn't wait to fulfill her son's dream. But when she heard the answer to her question, she was simply shocked. "I want a daddy," clearly uttered the child. Daddy stretched out the girl in surprise, but Bone. "They don't put dads under Christmas trees." "Too bad," the boy sighed heavily. "I would have liked that so much. Why does everyone at daycare have dads and I don't?" Kathy wanted to answer her son's question, but then the doorbell rang. "So I'll go and see who it is that came to us, and we'll talk," the girl said calmly. "Who do you think it might be?" Kathy knew that Nancy and Ben had gone to the Alps for the holidays, so it certainly wasn't them, and no one else could have come to them. "Who's there?" asked Kathy, and looked through the peephole. "Santa Claus was heard from behind the door, but I didn't order it." "Did you make a mistake?" shouted the girl, not planning to open the door. Liam could see the animator and get upset, and she had no money, offered her a discount. But even with it, the price for Santa Claus services was exorbitant. The girl moved away from the door, but the call was repeated. "What on earth do you want?" grumbled Kathy, and opened the door. "I didn't order Santa Claus," clearly said the girl, so that the man understood her. "We can talk." Santa Claus skipped the beard a little, and Kathy recognized him immediately. It was William in his Santa Claus costume. He looked great, like he was a real fairy tale wizard. But Kathy wasn't impressed with the surprise. "No, go away," through gritted teeth, she said, trying to speak as quietly as possible. "We have nothing to talk about. I've played the part. We shouldn't see each other anymore. Goodbye." "Kathy, why are you doing this to me?" "Yeah, my brother's a jerk, but it's not my fault. It's not fair to me. It's not fair." The girl was surprised. "You can't deny me the opportunity to communicate with my own nephew," the guy said seriously. "Come on with your nephew. You doubt it's your brother's son. We have nothing to talk about," shouted Kathy, and slammed the door. "Mom, who's that?" Liam suddenly stepped out into the hallway. "No one, just made a mistake," said the girl. She took her son by the hand and led him into the hall. But then the doorbell rang again. "I told you you were wrong," Goodbye, Kathy shouted angrily, loud enough to be heard outside the door. Who's that? Asked the boy, coming close to the door. Santa Claus came from William's cheerful bass. Mommy, Mommy, it's Santa Claus. Open up quickly, joyfully shouted the boy, clapping his hands. Son, Uncle's joking. It's not Santa Claus, said the girl to her son and turned to the door. I told you to go away. I'll call the police. The girl hoped this would scare William into leaving. But no, the guy rang the doorbell again. Kathy sighed heavily, and the boy ran to the door again and shouted, Who's there? It's Santa Claus. I brought you presents. I know your name is. Liam spoke William to the boy. He realized that only with the help of his nephew would he be able to get into the apartment. I'm right. I also know you've been good all year, so you'll get presents. Liam stood by the door, holding his breath. Kathy was terribly angry, so she swung the doors open to put the guy in his place, but immediately regretted her decision. Liam saw Santa Claus and rushed over to hug him. It's the real Santa Claus. Mommy, look, Santa Claus even knows my name. And you didn't want to let him in. But he's real. Excitedly, the child shouted all the way down the stairs. He grabbed Santa Claus by the sleeve and started dragging him into the apartment. Santa Claus, come on in. We got potatoes and a nice salad. Come on in, we got a treat for you. The girl realized she couldn't get rid of William now. The guy was fun. He gladly stepped into the apartment and went with the boy to the table. Kathy, however, tried to show her displeasure, but she failed. She was pleased to see William playing with her son and how happy the child was. Strangely enough, they quickly found a common language. Liam was diligently telling Santa Claus a poem he had recently learned with his mother. What did you get a present for? A huge construction set. The boy just squealed with happiness. Well, now Kathy closes his eyes and you. Santa Claus has presents for everyone, said William. No, I'm a big girl now, Kathy. I tried not to look at him. So what? Girls get presents too. Don't they, Liam? Santa Claus said cheerfully and winked at the boy. Mom, come on, closing your eyes and putting your palms up. Come on, Kathy, closing your eyes and putting up your palms. The girl stubbornly shook her head negatively, but then Liam intervened in the conversation. Mom, why are you so mean? You can't argue with Santa Claus. Let's close it. Please, Mom. Santa Claus is now offended and will leave and will never come to us again, he said. The girl had to obey. She closed her eyes and reached out her hand to William. Suddenly, something small and cold touched her hand. Kathy opened her eyes and saw a bracelet with a small pendant that said family on it. Kathy, you are my family now. William spoke softly, looking into her eyes. For the rest of the evening, Kathy was overcome with confused feelings. On the one hand, she was happy. She felt incredibly warm watching William play with her son. She had never seen Kostya so happy. The boy ran up to his mom all evening and said, Mom, we have a real Santa Claus visiting us. Can you imagine? A real one. Kathy only smiled in response to his words. On the other hand, she was afraid. She was afraid that when the chimes struck, William would disappear and she would be left alone again with a child who lacked male attention. It was 11:40 on the clock. Liam suddenly fell asleep right on the floor next to the new construction set Santa Claus had given him. Move him to the bed, William asked in a whisper, looking at Kathy. She nodded. The man took the sleeping boy in his arms and carried him into the room. The boy was so tired from playing with the fairy wizard that he didn't even wake up. William laid him on the bed and covered him with a blanket. He didn't want to think about his brother at all, who had decided to cowardly run away the morning after the conversation. But he couldn't just run away like that. Nervous, he quickly pulled up his shoes, causing him to drop his shoes in nice. His mom woke up from the rumble. Ben, where are you going? Asked the worried woman. Peter appeared behind her. And William, who stood and tried to hide a wry smile. but he wasn't very good at it. Hey, Mom. He didn't want to think about his brother at all, who had decided to cowardly run away the morning after the conversation. But he couldn't just run away like that. Nervous, he quickly pulled up his shoes, causing him to drop his shoes in nice. His mom woke up from the rumble. "Ben, where are you going?" asked the worried woman. Peter appeared behind her, and William, who stood and tried to hide a wry smile. But he wasn't very good at it. "Hey, Mom, it wasn't Emily who called. I think she's in labor." James lied, trying not to look at Evelyn. "I have to leave right away." "How are we going to get there?" asked William and James' father. The parents were very surprised that their son wanted to just run away without telling them anything. "We don't have a car. How are we going to get there?" "I thought you said you could drive us to your aunt's." "Well, nothing. You'll figure it out somehow." Threw the guy, quickly ran out of the apartment. "Go catch up with him," said William's mother. "Or rather, let him wait for us while we get ready." William ran after his brother, but not to persuade him to come back. He just wanted to look into his eyes one more time and say a few words of farewell. He didn't like it, of course, but he needed to finish last night's conversation. James had already gotten into the car and was about to close the door, but then he heard his brother's voice. "But you're a coward. I thought you'd think about it and tell Mom and Dad. If your son doesn't have a normal father, he could have loving grandparents and an uncle. And you turned out to be such a coward, running away with your tail between your legs again." The boy looked at his brother with contempt. He really wanted to hit him again, but he held back because he realized that his mother was watching them from the window. "Who are you to tell me how to live my life?" James hissed through his teeth. "I'm not going to lose everything I have because of a mistake I made a few years ago because of some girl's momentary weakness." William would not listen to him. He knew that if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to help himself. They would fight again. He turned and walked toward the driveway. If his mother saw him hit him, he would have to tell them everything. But he didn't want to. Why would he? It wouldn't do anyone any good. So William tried to keep his common sense and just walk away. "Wait," James called out to his brother. Well, William turned to him. "Now you're going to tell the parents everything about Kathy, about the baby." "No, but if I were you, I'd do it myself." "But you're a coward." William smirked. "That's right. I'm sure you won't," James said, ignoring his brother's words. "That's right. It's not my truth." William climbed the stairs, but he was in no hurry to enter the apartment. He was too annoyed, so he wanted to calm down a little. He didn't want to tell anyone anything, not even because he was worried about his parents' reaction. He felt sorry for James' wife and future child. The guy didn't want to interfere in someone else's life and ruin his brother's marriage. But he really wanted to support Kathy and her son, who his brother didn't care about. William decided that he wanted to socialize with them, to help them. But he didn't realize that very soon he would love them with all his heart. "Ben did leave after all?" Evelyn asked excitedly. "I saw him out the window." "Why didn't you stop him?" her mother began to ask. "His mom called him Emily. She's very worried and not feeling well." William's parents were about to arrive, and she couldn't calm down. "Kathy, pull yourself together," William said quietly and put his arm around the girl's shoulders. "Everything will be all right, I promise." But she hardly listened to him. She was terribly nervous and couldn't help it. The doorbell rang. It made Kathy look very pale. William went to open it. "Hi." "Hi, Dad." The girl heard the cheerful voice of William. "Well, how did it go out?" "Great, and I want to introduce you to my favorite girl." "Meet her," said the guy, entering the living room. "This is Kathy." "So we're Evelyn," she started to say, but immediately glassed. "Kathy, you said this was Helen. I don't understand anything anymore." "William, please explain." The woman slowly sank down on the chair. Peter did the same. "Yes, of course, now," said the guy, gathering his thoughts last time. "I deceived you a little. I didn't really have a girlfriend, Lena. I said so you wouldn't worry about how my personal life was turning out. But when you said you were coming to meet my fiancé, I was terrified. So I started looking for someone who could play this difficult role. But things didn't go according to plan. And I did find my love, Kathy, said the guy, hugged Kathy, and smiled at his parents. So, wait, Mom. Give all the details later, interrupted the guy. You wanted me to be happy. I am now happier than ever, said William, and paused. What else? I also have a son. What? What son? For Evelyn looked completely confused. I don't understand. Kathy's pregnant. No, but she has a beautiful boy named Liam. I want to marry Kathy and adopt him. But that's a big responsibility. Someone else's baby. No, Mom, it's not someone else's baby. He's my own, and I love him. You will too, I'm sure, said the kid. Really? Kathy, call your wife. Have her bring Liam over. William looked at Kathy, who had been sitting still the whole time. The girl flinched as if coming out of a stupor and ran to the phone. Evelyn wanted to take advantage of the moment when the girl left the room and talked to her son. But when she looked at him and saw how much love and happiness was in his eyes, she didn't interfere. The woman decided that life would put everything in its place. And life did. Evelyn and Peter really fell in love with grandson Liam. Grandma Dasha looked at the boy and did not understand why he looked so much like little William. Exactly like William, not like his biological father. The fact that Bones' daddy was James, they never found out. William and Kathy didn't want to tell. They were fine as they were. James tried to communicate with his relatives as little as possible. He was afraid of losing everything if the truth came out. The man had achieved too much to lose everything because of what he said was a mistake. He loved money, he loved luxury. But if Emily found out about the affair and the baby, his father-in-law would strip him of everything he had. So for the sake of keeping the secret, he was ready to give up even the nearest and dearest people. Everyone was happy. Kathy was happy with William and Liam, who was surrounded by the care of not only mom and dad, but also grandparents. This was something the boy could never have dreamed of. And James was happy, surrounded by power and money, an unloved wife, and a father-in-law who was killing the man more and more. Everyone had something they aspired to. Well, who's right? Life will show.